The man screams and says to search everything because they have to catch this woman. At this time, the main character fearfully turns to the Lord and says that if he exists, then he asks that she not be found, and she prays for this. Suddenly, a man comes up behind her and asks if she's a late-night visitor or a stowaway. He also asks who she is. The girl saw Khalid and doesn't understand what he's doing here because he thinks she needs to be on her guard. The man approaches Veronica and claims they haven't seen each other in a while. She protests, saying it's really just that, but he interrupts, telling her to drop her excuses and then asks what she's doing on his ship. Hearing this, the main character realized that this ship belonged to the prince of the Iran Empire Khalid, and she did not understand how she had boarded the wrong ship. The prince thinks that it is already late and asks if she wants to tell him anything, and also asks if she is sure that she has not made a mistake with the ship, and then hugs her. The girl thought that she should leave before, but at that moment, the ship moved so unexpectedly. The lady realizes that her body is not moving, and she wonders if there is an immobilizing poison applied to his palms, since she simply has no other explanation for all this. The guy hugs the girl tightly and says that she asked for it, and then puts her on the bed and presses her with his body. The judge announces that Veronica Hillsteel is charged with treason and sentenced to death, and then turns to the accused and asks her to make her final statement. The main character says that her last word is over, and the man interrupts her and asks if she has anything to say. She replies that of course, and then asks if love is a crime, because she simply loved the prince and does not understand why. Hearing this, the Lord doesn't understand how she dares to say such a thing after everything she's done, and considers her shameless. The man thinks she's apparently completely mad. The Marquise wonders if it is true that the Count did not even come to court today, and thinks that he must simply not be able to comprehend that his only daughter has grown up like this. The judge offers to take her away, and the main character turns to the prince and calls him her love, and asks him to be happy, and at that time, she thought that she would be even happier. The guard locked the girl in the dungeon, and she pulled the pin out of her hair, and then opened the chains, and she became curious whether she played as she should. The Count says that she did a perfect job, and Veronica says that she believes that their deal is complete, and that it is time to pay her father, and then objects, and says that the client is more correct. At this time, the main character does not understand why she became so bold, but thinks that everything passed simply because Veronica Hillsteel no longer exists. The girl remembers that she is the most ordinary commoner who does not even know who her father is, and her mother sold her when she was only 10 years old. The woman looked at the girl and asked if her name was Lacey, and then asked what she could do. In response, the little girl remained silent, and the lady said that, although she was beautiful, she considered it good form because it would help her when she grew up. The girl turns to the madam and says that she is smart and can do a lot, and therefore asks her to consider other options for how she can be useful to her, but not to take into account only her body. Hearing this, the woman smiled and asked what other options she was talking about, and also asked if she knew what the Hinshinso house was doing. The lady says that when a crime occurs, a witness is always needed, and some hire special actors for this purpose, and therefore offers to become one of their actresses in the future. Madame insists that no matter what role she's assigned, she must play it perfectly. The heiress presumed dead, the illegitimate child of an aristocrat, is a maid to the Marquis, and her acting skills are unique in Hinshinso, but actors were especially in demand. The lady assures the gentleman that he will not regret it. One day, a strange request came in. A girl was needed to act as an adopted daughter for several years. But the little girl wasn't asking for revenge or deception. Someone simply wanted her to be their daughter for a while. The lady says that the fee is equal to her 10-year salary, and then says that it is a strange offer, and asks if it is not tempting, since she believes that with that kind of money, she can even pay off her mother's debt. Hearing this, the main character thought that if she could pay off her debts, she would no longer have to play someone else's role, and she would finally be free, and then she said that she agreed. For 6 years, Veronica's goal was quite clear, and that was to help the first prince become a powerful heir. Her client, who was also her father, was supposed to find an aristocrat who would become his bride, and then she was supposed to disappear, and every city was supposed to know her. Although her entry into high society was delayed due to illness at her very first appearance, Veronica, the Count's youngest daughter, conquered everyone. The prince asks if she will give him her first dance, and she agrees. During the dance, the protagonist thinks that this is excellent because everything is going according to plan. Veronica turns to the prince and claims that she will make him king, and at this time a competitor appears just in time. Her father easily found an angelic girl who was perfect for him, but despite her persistent, albeit love-inducing competition, the prince ultimately chose the angel over her as expected. Veronica, blinded by jealousy, was supposed to poison his fiancée, and as the most beautiful girl in high society, was supposed to become a rare villain. As planned, the poisoning failed, but proved to everyone that the lives of both the first prince and his entourage would always be in danger. Of Hillsdale did not decide anything here, and the sentence was passed by the court. The girl thought that the story would end here, and then informed the madam that she had returned. The woman says that she created a lot of trouble and also arrived in a carriage for prisoners. Laces asks in surprise what trouble she is talking about and also wonders if she has forgotten how talented she is and says that everything went just perfectly. The lady offers to take a look at it, and the little girl, surprised, asks if it's some kind of bonus. The woman counters, explaining that it's a wanted poster and believes she was stabbed in the back by a client, her father's. Hearing this, the main character asks in surprise how this could have happened, and she wonders if she did something wrong and suggests that perhaps she got carried away and disrupted the count's plans. Lacey understands that even if this is so, she does not agree because according to the count's plan, the first prince endowed with many talents was supposed to rise higher and higher, and he even built his future by choosing a bride for him. But after that, the villain Veronica appeared and said that the prince would be hers or no one's, and it had to be a happy ending. And no matter what, everything was planned that way. The status of a countess can always be obtained or restored with the help of a groom, and she just wanted to pay off her debts and then calmly go to a place where no one would know her. The girl understands that all that remains is to enjoy the second act in the play of her own life, because a happy ending was definitely waiting for her. Lacey screams and claims that she did everything she was told and therefore does not understand what went wrong, because for the last 5 years she has only been fighting with all the troubles and does not understand why and what this is and how this happened at all. Madame thinks that this is because she got into character too well and thinks that this scared him. The girl screams and asks if she even hears what she's saying, and the woman replies that she can get a double reward if she turns it in herself, and the little girl asks that she doesn't even know how to thank her. The main character asks what about her money and what about her debts, and then asks if she is going to just get rid of her and throw her away like trash. The woman says that she understands that this is unfair, but she needs to save her own skin, and therefore suggests that she save her life and go to the port. The lady tells the little girl that she was her favorite child, so she lets her go because one day she will have to answer for everything, so she suggests that she take care of herself. The young lady thought that she was still able to disguise herself with the help of magic, thanks to the grace of the madam. Suddenly, the girl realized the men had organized a hunt for her because they understood that their Lacey was their future 10 million gold coins. The man said she would die anyway, and therefore asked her to at least let her family profit from it. Hearing this, the main character thought that they are all like that because children have not known pity since childhood. The guy insists, shouting that they always find what they want and that sooner or later she will be in their hands, so they suggest surrendering. He says he will spend the bounty on her head wisely. The girl asks if they are really ready to send her to execution and then says, how can this be, since they were together for so long? And at that time, she thought about this damn count, since he put her on the wanted list so that she would definitely be caught, and his name would remain pure. The little girl thinks that he is an idiot, and she will never let his plans come true, because she understands that she worked honestly, and the reward was unexpected. The guy asks Lacey why she's acting so stupid, and then claims she has nowhere to hide and nowhere to run, so he suggests she surrender. He asks if she still doesn't admit her guilt, and then claims the client is so dissatisfied that he's even put a bounty on her head. At this time, the main character thought that the freedom she had been striving for was almost within her grasp, and she realized that she could not give up now and then jumped. The men were surprised because they didn't understand why the rain started so suddenly. They thought Lacey was crazy because she jumped into the water, and because of the rain, they couldn't fish out her body. At this time, the girl thought that she wanted them to leave already and just go back and do other things, and after a few minutes, she realized that the dripping had almost stopped, and she considered herself lucky, but she lost everything she had. The young lady understands that she is now an outcast of society, a criminal who committed treason, but she knows that she managed to save her life. But at what cost? Not much time has passed, but it seems that this is exactly the ship that Madame had in mind. She believes that the main thing is that no one recognizes hers. The guards scream and tell her to search everything because they have to catch her. At this time, the main character turns to the Lord and says that if he exists, then she asks that she not be found and prays for this. A man approaches her and asks whether she is a night visitor or a stowaway, and also inquires which she prefers to be. 2 years ago, the Count approached his daughter and informed her that a delegation from the Iron Empire would soon arrive, and so she should be prepared. Count Hillsteel was Lacey's client. The gentleman suggests paying special attention to the delegation's representative, Prince Khalid. She asks if he's nagging his perfect daughter again, and then declares that his concern is simply unbearable. The lady claims he's a twisted perfectionist with high standards, and then asks if she's ever let him down, and therefore thinks that's enough of the lectures for today. The Count says that it is necessary to establish contact with him, and the girl continues to talk in order to improve trade with the West, and he simply cannot miss such an opportunity having such a high position. The man says that his daughter is very smart, but she should be vigilant because her rival could always turn out to be a bigger fish. The aristocrats say that his ship was full of gold, and his delegation consisted of more than 100 people, and they brought back an unheard of amount of wealth, and the prince looked simply divine, and his mere appearance knocked everyone off their feet. The main character saw the Prince of the Iron Empire, and she became interested in whether she would find a common language with him, but she hoped that everything would go well. The young woman thought that her father should not worry, since he asked her for help, and she would do everything to ensure that, as always, things would happen at the highest level. His Majesty approaches the girl and says that she looks like a dog because she wags her tail quite a bit, and it looks just like a dog's. At this time, the main character looked at the prince, and she does not understand what he is doing, but she understands that she must be on her guard. Khalid turns to the lady and says that they haven't seen each other for a long time. She objects and says that she is actually just, but he interrupts her and suggests that she leave her excuses and then asks what she is doing on his ship. Hearing this, the little girl realized that this was the ship of the Prince of the Empire and that she had boarded the wrong one. He said it was getting late and asked if she had anything she wanted to say. His Majesty asks if she's sure she's in the right room and then embraces her. At this point, the main character thinks she should leave, but suddenly, the ship moves unexpectedly. Veronica realized that his palms were coated with an immobilizing poison, and she simply had no other explanation for all this. The prince laid the girl on the bed and then lay down on top of her and pressed her with his body. At this time, the main character does not understand what is happening at all and why she does not resist. When the servants saw the lady, they turned to their master and asked if she had escaped. He said that if they spotted her, they should immediately throw her off the ship, as he considered it unthinkable that any mongrels could be hiding there, but he would visit His Highness again later. The Crown Prince turns to Simon and orders him to stop searching, as there are no strangers here, and it is better to prepare for sailing, and he leaves the rest to him. Khalid says she hit him, and the first time was okay, but the second was undeserved, and if anyone had seen them, they would have thought he was forcing himself on her. She claims that's exactly what he did. Khalid, Crown Prince of the Iron Empire, arrived in Weldon because of a trade agreement. The young lady understands that it was awkward, but everything turned out well because she was on the wrong ship, and says that if he pretends not to see her, she will quietly leave. His Majesty asks if that means that beating people is a completely ordinary matter for her, and then shows the piece of paper and says how he could forget that she is a wanted criminal. Lacey doesn't understand why he even recognized her, and the prince thinks that there's no need to worry about it so much, and then asks if they know each other well, because their first meeting is hard to forget since she wags her tail just like a dog. Hearing this, the girl became curious about this perverted form of flirting and realized that she usually never deviates from a pre-prepared script, but at this time, it is incredibly difficult for her to maintain her composure when such things are said. The prince apologizes and explains that he doesn't know their language very well yet and asks if puppy sounds better. The lady claims that his vocabulary is simply excellent, and in the future she will not even need a translator, but he clearly has problems with his eyesight, and then asks if he wags his tail. Veronica says it's so stupid, she doesn't even want to answer. Luckily, the angelic bride came to the irritated Veronica's aid and smoothed over all the rough edges. Thanks to this, not without drama and irritation, a trade agreement was concluded. The Duke tells his daughter that that this is a good job and therefore suggests being as cold as possible towards Prince Khalid, but it would be nice if he found a bride here and gave her a little of his power. Hearing this, the main character thought that she hadn't tried very hard, but everything had gone well, and even though the first impression wasn't particularly pleasant, she thought that the prince felt like a fish in water, but he understood that a savage is a savage, even if he had hung himself with gold. Veronica reports that he showed up at the banquet almost naked and with a little girl, and then asks if he is really unable to buy his own clothes, and asks if he likes it when everyone laughs at him. And at that time, the little girl thought that if their first meeting had not been like this, she would have been much more reserved. The prince reminds her that she didn't mince her words then and touches her earring. The girl understands that her disguise magic leaves practically no traces, but all magical objects can be easily noticed, but it is much more difficult for her to use them, which is why she used her true face when playing the role of Veronica. The young lady doesn't understand how he quickly realized that she, Veronica, is the bigger fish, because she carefully disguised herself, but he saw through her in no time. The main character was interested in how he was able to so quickly and accurately understand that the problem was in the earrings. His Highness says he hopes she will now be honest with him, and then asks if she is his overnight guest or a criminal trying to escape. She replies that it is something in between. The prince says that faithful dogs always follow their masters. That is why he then called her a dog, because she followed him like a faithful dog, and then he named the first prince Daniel. His Majesty informs him that he could take his place. Meanwhile, the young lady reflects on the fact that, if you think about it, the reason all this has fallen on her head is the first prince. Khalid says that if this happened to her, because of him, he's ready to take the heat of this hellish tribe. Hearing this, the little girl doesn't understand what he's trying to offer her and thinks it's another scam. The prince asks if she is ready to enter this hellish tribe with him and sail far across the sea. At this time, the main character thought that it turns out that her game was not so bad, and then asks if he is joking, because she thinks that they have different paths, and at this time, she thinks that she needs to try to talk to him. His Majesty reports that he saw them grab her, but doesn't know all the details, and then reminds her that he will repeat his question again, and asks who she prefers to be, a stowaway or a faithful dog. The lady asks where the rare villain option is, and suggests she choose any role as she can play anything. He asks if that means it's just an act for her, and suggests that she only met Daniel because of her role. The little girl agrees with him and says that's right, because that's what her client, whose name she won't reveal, wanted. He asks if she can ask for anything. Veronica doesn't understand what he's getting at, and then says that if they pay enough, she'll agree. The prince says that to the west of the Iran Empire, there is a place called Sureb, and it is a beautiful city in the middle of the desert. There are 3 rooms there, one full of gold, another silver, and the third is filled with rubies and sapphires, and she can choose any of them. The girl calls him a dear client and asks if he'd like to hire her, then asks what role she should play. He says that since she could play such a rare, dreamy villain, he wonders if she could handle the role of a model bride. His Majesty asks if she will be his bride, the one he will fall in love with at first sight, and anyone who sees them must believe in the sincerity of their feelings. The prince says that if she doesn't want to, he asks if this means she prefers to be a criminal, and then says that if she can't decide, she doesn't have to answer at all. The main character says she really likes his methods, and then offers to put his arm around her neck. The young gentleman asks if he stole her first kiss, or if she wants to refuse, and so suggests simply saying what role she prefers. The little girl says that she agrees to be his beloved bride, and he says that in that case, they will sail away immediately, and kisses her hand. The ship's captain screams and orders everyone to prepare for departure because they are returning to the Iran Empire. The servant asks why they are sailing away so suddenly, and Simon explains that the crown prince has finished his business and even found his beloved, which means there is no longer a reason to stay here. The gentleman asks the knight if he's upset because he feels he still hasn't found his lost youngest daughter. The man replies that he couldn't find out anything about her and that she's probably not even in this city, but he thinks the crown prince has found himself a bride, and that's great. Simon reports that there is still one problem left, and Lanahan has found a fugitive girl who is wanted, and they are taking her with them, and therefore the crown prince was in a great hurry to return. Hearing this, the knight does not understand how she dared to seduce him, and then asks if he wants to say that she used her charms on him. The gentleman asks if he knows his highness's character, and then says that he is not keen on women, which is why the methods of the Weldon aristocrats did not work. At this time, the girl thought that she was definitely lucky, and then screaming said that she had not yet signed the contract and asked why they were already so worried about her, because in the morning, they brought her a lot of food, and she did not know how she was supposed to eat it all. The baby is curious whether the food is poisoned, but thinks that maybe it's worth trying a little, and after a few minutes, says that it's very tasty. But she understands that she needs to remain calm, because she feels like he knew she'd end up on his ship, because why would a representative of a delegation leave a foreign kingdom so hastily? It's disrespectful. The main character reflects on the fact that perhaps he expected this outcome. The young gentleman turns to the girl and says that he is not sure that she will be able to eat so much, and she says that everything is very tasty, and then asks if he will join her, because she has something to say. Veronica says that she will be frank and that she should know what he is hiding before they sign the contract. Khalid claims he has nothing to hide, and although he's kept quiet about some things, she was his goal from the start. He hadn't planned to sail so soon. It turned out he'd already gotten what he wanted, so he believes there was no point in delaying any longer. The girl asks if this means he knew from the start and arranged everything with the lady to ensure she ended up in his hands. Hearing this, the gentleman is surprised, and she insists he just gave himself away. The main character understands that this is precisely why he did not hand over the criminal, and it turns out that he knew about the earrings from the very beginning, which is why he ordered her to sail away immediately so that she would not change her mind and run away. The young lady reports that she finally understood everything, and at that time thought about the fact that he needed an actress to play the role of the villain Veronica, and then asks if he needed an actress all this time, and probably found out everything about her, because he understands that it was all a setup. The prince, surprised, asks how he could have learned anything from her. The little girl insists that he knew for sure she had a weapon, which is why he held her hands and knew about the magical earrings. Lacey thought that among all of Madame's children, she was the only one to whom she had given something so valuable, and it was their secret, but she understood that Madame had given her away, and that was why she could no longer work at Weldon's, because she really was a good actress. The girl says she thought her relationship with Madame was special, but apparently it wasn't, and then asks how much it cost him. He claims she's talking as if he's done something wrong, and the little girl asks if she's wrong, and then she thinks that since he's wearing a ton of gold, he's allowed to do whatever he wants. The young lady remembers that, although she left unnoticed, they immediately chased after her, as if they were waiting for her, but she thought that they were all there like brothers and sisters, and understands that it was they who drove her onto this ship. Khalid reports that he thinks the atmosphere has become tense, and the girl, screaming, claims that it's not just that it's become tense, because her plan and role in Weldon have all failed. The prince wonders if this means that all the bridges have been burned, and everything is fine between them, and also asks if he understood something wrong. Lacey realizes it won't be easy with him, as he's a veteran of the game, just like her. She wonders if she'll be able to see into this man's soul, and then she kisses him. The little girl understands that he has an instant reaction, a feral aura, and a natural sixth sense. She thought about how she hates aggressive men, but she doesn't really want to resist him because she's attracted to him and doesn't understand why he's so good at it. The girl understands that in any case, this man also wants her, and then puts the knife aside and thinks that it is better for her to take advantage of this. The gentleman asks what that was, and then says he thought she just wanted to talk to him. The lady reminds him that he seems to have mentioned that she might run away with him, and therefore suggests discussing the terms of their agreement. The little girl understands that now is not the best time to give in to emotions, and then says that he hired her, and it is important for her to understand what is required of her, and this cannot be forgotten, because they are now in the same boat. When His Majesty told his assistant, he asked in surprise that it turns out that his chosen one is just an actress under contract, and this means that she will not rule with him in the future and protect his people. Simon asks if he'll let her go when the contract ends. Simon El-Saka, the manager of Hetroneft, is Khalid's right-hand man. The prince says perhaps, and the aide asks in surprise how that is possible. His Majesty asks if he thinks he's being too loud and reminds him that he must have forgotten he's speaking to the crown prince. Simon says that since he's not happy with his tone, he should stand up and explain. The gentleman says he already stood up and explained, then declares that that's all. Khalid says that he does not know all the details of her life, but as far as he knows, she is a professional actress and has played all her previous roles perfectly, including the image of Veronica. The assistant asks what kind of work this is, and when the gentleman looks at him, he says that he understood everything and remains silent. A few minutes later, you ask His Highness why he decided to sign a contract with her. The prince says that he cannot say for sure and simply suggests taking it as a fact because it will simply help him achieve his desired goal. The man says that since she is suitable for his so-called goals, the gentleman interrupts him and says that of course he likes her honesty. Simon claims that he is the only honest one here, and His Highness and she are real foxes. The prince says that he then instructs him to draw up a contract because every time he opens his mouth to say something, his breath comes true since he is bound to her by an oath, and they met 10 years ago and gave each other an oath. At this point, the main character began to wonder if she had done the right thing as she finally realized the reality of what was happening. The sea is unpredictable, so it's a bit of a risk to embark on a long journey, and she understands that getting from Weldon to Iron will be very difficult, even if someone is willing to risk their life to do so. At this time, the Count does not understand how she dared to disappear, and he orders them to find her at any cost. Madame informs the mistress that their actors are not working at the moment, but she would recommend them. Lacey understands that she was most likely lucky because no one will be able to find her, and she found herself an excellent shelter, but she does not understand why it was the bride and the bed that reminded her that she and Halit were doing something. The girl doesn't understand whether he is going to marry a stranger, and so suddenly, and she wonders why he wants to do this. The man tells His Highness that there are only 3 days' journey left and asks if he can reconsider. He asserts that his decision is final. Simon says that in a few days they will cross the border and find themselves on their own land, and there will no longer be persecution, and he will have to explain himself to everyone. Khalid says that if he suddenly decides to find out what happened 10 years ago, he will be disappointed, and then says that she doesn't even remember him. The man asks, surprised, what he plans to do, knowing that sooner or later their agreement with her will end. He insists that before then, he'll seduce her. The prince says he must seduce her before the contract expires, so that she will remain with him afterward. Simon, surprised, asks His Highness if he'll succeed, and then remembers that he'd modestly clarified and felt embarrassed. His Majesty says they're from different countries, and this worries him. And besides, he doesn't have much experience in love affairs. The aide says he knows this, and then asks how he plans to win her heart. The gentleman says that he will have to come up with this because he believes that this is part of his duties. Simon says that he is confused because he doesn't understand anything about love, let alone seduction. The prince thought that this was the first time he was so nervous, and then asked what he should do and whether he should go naked, although it seems to him that all women like daredevils, but he believes that some people might also like timid men. The assistant asks in surprise if he is absolutely sure that seduction begins like this, and maybe some shameless water spirit has possessed him, and therefore asks him not to walk around naked in front of her, and if he is too assertive from the very beginning, she might simply be afraid of him. The prince says his words confuse him, and he's unsure because he has no plan. He says that, returning to the clothes, he could seduce her, which means he's his right-hand man, but he's a lousy advisor, and he's even more so for contradicting him. Simon, surprised, asks when he ever behaved inappropriately. Khalid explains that she's been through a tough time and feels he needs to help her forget about it. The aide says her former life shouldn't be more important to her than her future or present life. His Majesty says that even if they forget their oath, and even if they don't carry it through the centuries, he will still be by her side because he can no longer lose her, and therefore believes their future is in his hands. The young gentleman reflects on how she will now be happy because he will take care of her and buy her everything she wants, since she is his fiancée. Time is now on his side, and he will exploit her weakness to win her lonely heart. At this time, the main character woke up and thought that it was good, because it was just a dream, but suddenly she heard a noise and did not understand why there was loud knocking. The girl opened the door and thought the crown prince was taking a bath, but suddenly saw a knight and asked if he had been ordered to guard her. He replied that he had. The little girl thinks this is very good, and that she needs to know something, and then asks if she can ask him a few questions. The knight insists that he will answer them all honestly. The main character asks what women's rights are in Irina, and if they are the same as in Weldon. He replies that in Irina, after the wedding, newlyweds discuss what surname they will use, and it's not uncommon for the woman to become the head of the family. The young lady realizes this is significantly different from her country and then asks if the crown prince will be involved in state affairs. He replies that he doesn't know. Lacey asks if the crown prince is involved in diplomacy. The man replies that he doesn't know, and the little girl reminds him that he said to ask about anything. The little girl looked at the prince and asked if he had arrived yet, and offered to come to her since they needed to finish the contract. At this point, the prince looked at the contract and thought about how he'd arrived straight from his bath, but she didn't care at all. She couldn't understand why he had that expression, and she wondered if they signed contracts in Iron's empire too. The gentleman says that parties A and B agree to the following points, and then sign this contract. First, party A was hired by the client, while party B promises to faithfully perform the role of the bride with whom the prince fell in love at first sight. The client promises not to extradite party A to the kingdom of Weldon and provides party A with all necessary information, but also provides it with due material and moral support. If all points of the agreement are fulfilled, party A will have to receive a reward of 10 million gold. The contract can be concluded verbally or in writing, and after the contract is completed, the client never has to look for a contractor for the duration of the contract. The main character claims that they must discuss this point of how long she should be his bride. The man asks why there's no clause about what will happen if she fails to fulfill her role. The girl claims it's because that has never happened before and never will. She then agrees and says she'll sign that clause. Lacey realizes she deliberately omitted this clause and then says that if the other party fails to fulfill their end of the contract, the client can demand any compensation. He asks if that could be anything. The girl offers to sign this contract and then reminds them that they haven't discussed the contract term, but she hopes that it will be valid for no more than 2 years, and if it's too long, everything could end in failure, as happened with Veronica. The prince understands that she had such a long contract and must have been through a lot. The lady informs him that if the contract lasts longer than 2 years, it might arouse suspicion, as they will not have children. Hearing this, the gentleman began to cough, and the girl said that of course, she understood that sharing a bed was inevitable, since they would become newlyweds according to the contract, and therefore she thought it would be a good idea to use contraception. Lacey explains that she is not going to agree to an unsafe relationship and then asks the prince if he even listens to hers. Halit lifted the girl onto Rocky and asked if the contract had already been signed, and that since they were now a couple, they could do whatever they were supposed to do. She said she needed to sign it. The man says that she can do whatever she wants with this agreement, but he will do with her what he wants, and then he puts the girl on the bed and begins to kiss her. The prince realizes that before he could even begin, she fell asleep and thought that maybe she was very tired, and therefore wanted her to have a good rest. The knight asks his assistant to allow him to meet with his master. Lanahan, commander of the Iron Empire's border guards, is Sanakan's twin sister. Simon explains that he has already refused him several times, and his sister explains to Sanahan that she must meet with him. The girl screams and says that she also wants to see the crown prince because she cannot remain silent, and says that her brother just wants to see her and she wants to receive his blessing. The woman claims that she can be understood because she is the best mutant hunter and also participated in the purge of the Shariber, and it was thanks to this that she earned the prince's trust. The girl says that she wanted to meet him, and the man says that he heard that he has already blessed several people, and the Cynican asks to allow her to do this. The man says he's sorry, but the assistant objects and says that's not true at all, because everything is fine, and Sanahan is very important to them all. The knight believes that they should behave with dignity because despite their lowly origins, they were allowed to work for the imperial family, and therefore he understands perfectly well that sometimes they cause a lot of trouble. The man claims that they are both very talented and that the crown prince personally hired them, and therefore suggests not to be too strict with himself. At this time, Her Majesty asks if she took a bath after him, and the lady replies that she did, because he himself suggested that she do so. The main character thought that she hoped that the paralyzing poison came from under his nails, and then said that it was not very easy for her. The man asks in surprise what happened, and she explains that the maids were acting strangely, and she didn't really understand them because she doesn't know their language. Lacey remembered lying in a bath filled with aromatic herbs and thinking it was heaven while her body was being thoroughly massaged. The maids suddenly started laughing, and the little girl didn't understand what was happening to them and why they were reacting like that, and then she thanked them for their work. The girl said the maids started whispering among themselves and she didn't even know what they were talking about. At that time, the maids were discussing how beautiful and kind their mistress was. The little girl reports that the sudden appearance of the bride at the crown prince's should have caused suspicion or alarm, but they were so kind to her. The prince thinks that she speaks as if he idolizes her, and this is something bad, but the girl objects and says that this is not the point, and thought that she just felt a little awkward. Khalid says that she took a bath and he is glad that she took it, but now he asks to let him apologize since last night did not happen, because he could not do anything because she suddenly fell asleep. The main character objects and says that this is not it, because she told him that she needs time and is not ready yet. His Majesty, surprised, asks if this is what she asked for, and then he kisses her. The little girl pushes him away and asks him to wait, but he insists they are alone in this small room, and considers it a miracle he lasted this long. The guy presses closer to the girl and then lifts her dress. She screams, asking him to wait, and then stop because suddenly she saw something and asks what it is. The young man says she saw a Terra, and then asks if this is the first time she's seen this. Unlike Weldon, Irina still has magic, so each person there has their own magical power, especially artificial ones, can even give their powers a form, which is how the guardian spirit Tiru appears. The prince explains that he is the only person who can support Terra even beyond the Empire's borders, and therefore suggests not to worry, as the marshmallow will not harm her. Khalid asks if they'll continue. At that moment, the girl thinks about how much she really wants it, because his gentle touch, warm embrace, and especially those passionate kisses, are incredibly pleasant. The main character understands that there is one problem, and she can kiss him, but she just can't do it because it's her first time. Lacey recalls the madam's words about how only the game is important, and if she lies and believes her lie, then her interlocutor will believe her, and therefore suggests always getting into her role, even if her performance seems unrealistic to them. Madame always told them not to give their hearts to anyone, because in the end, it could turn out to be a sad ending. The little girl mumbles that it's risky, and he asks in surprise what she's talking about, because he didn't hear anything. The girl explains that she said she wouldn't tolerate safe relationships, and he says he's taken care of everything, and even one bracelet would have eliminated the possibility of conception. The prince reports that she then went to the bathroom and put on all three, and so he thought it was a sign, and they could become one. Hearing this, the main character remembered the maids, and now understands why they were whispering and giggling so joyfully, because she didn't know that it was a contraceptive. The gentleman says that if she understood everything, then he now suggests going to bed. The girl says she'd like to add one more point to their conversation, limiting excessive sex. Hearing this, the guy, surprised, asks if he's like that. The girl explains that when the role of Togo requires it, it's one thing, but then asks if she's obligated to play it all the time, and she says that, in public, of course they'll play the sweet couple. The prince says that she can do as she wants, and she gives him a contract, and asks him to sign it, and then asks if he has chosen a name for her, since he understands that she will not be Veronica in his country. Khalid thought that she would use her real name, and then asks if this is true, and the lady objects, and says that of course not, because they think it is extremely dangerous. His Majesty says that she will be a Nelisi because it translates as a sea fairy, and then asks what it is, and if she doesn't like it. At this time, the main character thought that this smile of his and this man is clearly thinking for himself, but he understands that Nelisi sounds good, and then signs the contract. The knight asks if the captive is acting up now. Knowing the marshmallow has frightened her greatly, Simon says she managed to hide for a very long time, and he wonders if she might have been using magic herself. The man apologizes to the gentleman, and then explains that he somehow didn't think about it, and the assistant asks if he noticed anything like that about her. The knight apologizes and explains that he didn't see her use magic. Simon looks at the captive and says that they all give up sooner or later, and will watch her until she starts talking, and as soon as they return to their homeland, this will be over. Simon asks, how about Togo taking her magic? And the man says that it is even worse than taking life, and asks if that is true. The gentleman asks how Lanahan is doing. Arthur replies that not very well, and when he started to leave, she was ready to finish him off to find out where he was going, and even got hit a couple of times. Hearing this, the assistant understood where the bruises on his body came from, and then said that they were approaching the border, and it was necessary to strengthen security. Simon announces that he's come to see the Crown Prince's fiancée and apologizes for delaying the formal introduction. The lady replies that everything is fine and that they are old acquaintances. The girl says she's grateful to him and hopes for a happy future. The man says he's grateful for her kindness and promises to be by her side no matter what, as her generosity is astounding. The prince suggests that she first do what he asked, and then says that lately she has not been able to sleep and she is not feeling well. Simon asks the lady if he can examine her, and she agrees. The man looks closely into her eyes and then touches her face, and she doesn't understand what he's trying to find. The assistant reports that she doesn't seem to be sick, but suggests that perhaps she doesn't handle long voyages well because she's so tiny. At this point, the main character realized that he was not only the prince's right-hand man, but also a doctor. Halit asks if she simply needs to eat more, and asks what about the rest. The man replies that she is healthy, and the prince says that, thank God, because he was a little worried about her, because she is very fragile. At this time, the little girl thought that he was a talented person and Khalid's confidant, and therefore thought that she needed to become friends with him. His Majesty informs them that he will check their course and return, and then orders them to take care of his bride and also to watch their language. Lacey asks what the crown prince said about her. The man replies that he mentioned that she would become the new ruler of the Sareb and in the future the beautiful empress of the Iran Empire. The lady asks if this is all, and he says that he also heard that His Highness fell in love with her at first sight. Simon thought that she doesn't know their language well and loves red wine, and is very picky about food, so it is necessary to serve her only the best dishes, and then says that first of all, you need to look at her reaction when choosing a dish. At this time, the main character does not understand what kind of joke this is, and what he wants to achieve by stuffing her with food. The man says that he still doesn't know her well enough to serve her with dignity, and at that time, he began to wonder if he had said too much. The main character explains that, frankly speaking, she doesn't quite understand him, and then wonders why he doesn't ask anything about her himself. Simon reports that he tried to understand her by observing her actions and the coldness of her thoughts, and even the sailor who saw her on the day of her arrival didn't recognize them, but many here don't know Weldon's language and what happened there. The gentleman explains that it is natural, therefore, even those who saw the wanted poster did not understand what was written there. At this time, Lacey remembered the conversation with the prince and how Simon was watching them, and she wondered if this meant that he had already formed the wrong impression of her. The girl asks if he doesn't care, and if he's upset that she became the prince's bride. He explains that, as previously stated, he had his reasons, so from now on, he will judge her by her actions. The main character thinks that perhaps it is for the best that the conversation took place honestly, and therefore thanks him, and then says that he hopes that they will get along in the future. The lady saw that the gentleman had changed somehow, and asked what was wrong with him. He answered that nothing, and then asked if he could help her with something. Lacey says she'd like to ask about the bracelets, then asks if all the women in Arena wear them. He says not everyone does, and that only His Highness has them on the ship, and that it's a very expensive item that was made especially for her. The young lady, surprised, asks if this means Halit values them. The man replies that he probably does, but the little girl suddenly realizes that she has several bracelets and might have a rival. Simon reports that since they have already started talking about the crown prince, who is the most powerful heir to the throne in the Iran Empire, and then reports that he is not only very educated, but also a master of martial arts. The gentleman claims that he has an outstanding appearance, which women literally go crazy over, and then screaming says that he has never been deprived of female attention because the prince is perfect, but still has not taken a single concubine. A man thinks his master doesn't date women. Upon hearing this, the woman assumes he may have had a partner and wonders if this is true. The main character reflects on the fact that if he didn't date women, it means he could have slept with men, and then says that it turns out she didn't know the crown prince at all. The lady understands that Simon praised him, but somehow she, and then asks how they reacted when he decided to take an unknown woman as his wife, and thinks that this aroused some suspicions in him. Simon reports that some were surprised, but they had no doubt the decision was right. She asks why surprised, and the man explains that it's because someone has finally found someone who can steal His Highness's heart, which had previously been sealed shut to everyone. The gentleman thought that, because of the ban, he cannot talk to her about his magical power, but he understands that everyone falls in love with him because the prince only has to look into someone's eyes. At this time, Khalid enters the room and says that they got along too quickly and then tells the assistant to leave. The little girl thought that they didn't even have time to share a secret, and she had a lot of questions to which she didn't have time to hear the answers. Simon suggests the gentleman take a good rest, as the journey will soon be over. The girl thought that she was sure the prince was kind, but people in front of him are literally always tense. His Majesty asks if the conversation was a success. She replies that it was quite fun to chat with him, but he came and everything ended. The prince says that since she is so interested in him, he asks if he can stay longer next time, and tells her not to get too close to him. Lacey asks if he's jealous. The guy crying out asks how he can be jealous of his subordinate. The main character asks what happened since he was in such a hurry when he left. He explains that the prisoner attempted to escape, and some of the crew members were injured due to her destructive power. His Majesty asks if they've started treating them. The knight crying out asks why she ran away, and he can't understand how she could even think of killing the crown prince. The gentleman explains that he is worried that she was able to get out because her limbs were shackled, and at that time he thought that most likely she had an accomplice. The guard asks why they should leave this captive alive, and then turns to His Highness and claims that they must get rid of her immediately. The prince says that he understands him, but his principles of treating prisoners are not subject to discussion or change, and then says that she will definitely be punished as soon as they get to the Iran, and he promises this. The knight says that he understands and apologizes for making him worry. He is also glad that they captured this prisoner in time, and she was unable to escape. Hearing this, the main character, surprised, asks why he wants to keep her alive. His Majesty replies that it's not that important, but it's the right thing to do, and then asks what's bothering her. The protagonist explains that she simply received a lot of useful information from Simon. He thinks there's too much paperwork, and then asks if she's sure it's just short notes. The little girl says what can she do because her protection and freedom depend on it, and therefore she must approach such things responsibly, and then asks if her client wouldn't want to thank her even more for this. The girl asks if he has forgotten, and then reminds him that he himself said that he would not skimp on support, and she talks about material support. The gentleman asked her what she wanted, and the lady thought about freedom, which had always been her greatest desire, and at that moment she realized that she would get it, but she didn't know what would happen next. The protagonist reflects on her need to find a place where the shadows of her past won't haunt her, and in such a place, she'd like to simply enjoy life. However, she understands that she shouldn't give in to her emotions. The prince asks if she can hear him, and Lacey replies that she would just like more money and only money. Simon, standing on the deck, says that a person who has no magic at all is so unusual, and the knight thinks that their princess is so special. The gentleman says that she also has a rare eye color, and purple is a very noble color, and apparently God rewarded her with kindness, although he deprived her of magic. The assistant says that he is really looking forward to the moment when they cross the border to find out what she is capable of, because he understands that she was just being friendly. But after so many years of communicating with the crown prince, this is like a breath of fresh air that can even bring tears. The knight asks the master in surprise if he is crying, and Simon explains that it is just a memory, and he understands that His Highness's decision was correct. The man says he now understands why the gentleman was so insistent about going to Weldon. Hearing this, he objects, claiming there were other reasons, and that everything worked out well, and he thought it might help with his cleansing. Simon says that he feels like he took too much of his time, because he understands that he has to patrol, and then he looked at the sky and thought that now everything will be fine, because she was here at the behest of the sky. The assistant says that time is needed to reveal the whole truth to her, and first she needs to study their history, otherwise she will form the wrong impression of them. The prince asks for forgiveness, that so much has fallen on her because of his decision, because he thinks that he ruined everything. Lee says she just needs money. He asks, surprised, if her earlier words didn't imply she needed something else besides money. The little girl replies that it didn't mean anything, and the guy thought that everything was supposed to be different because his heart sank. She says she'll play her part as long as she gets paid. Halit says he can really do anything she wants. The girl says she already said there would be enough money. Simon, screaming, turns to His Highness and reminds him that he said that he was going to seduce her. He says that this is true, and the man asks why he thinks that it turns out that his charms don't work on her. The prince says that everything is complicated because she is not as simple as he thought, and sometimes it even happens that this girl is unattainable for him. At this time, the main character thought that she always wanted freedom so much, But to be honest, she never thought that she would actually be able to get it, and she thinks that maybe the problem is that she has already gotten used to this kind of life, and then someone extended a helping hand to her so quickly. Lee understands that he cares for her, looking at her with such warm and tender eyes, and saying her name as if she were very important to him. However, he believes that love is a clause missing from their contract, and she sees that this man desperately needs her. Suddenly, the little girl saw the tiger cub and thought that he was very huge, and that's why it seemed to her that she would never get used to it because she was scared. Lacey hopes that he doesn't eat people and understands that one shouldn't let fear get the better of one's mind, and at that time, she thought that maybe she should try to escape. The lady understands that this is Tara, and she is interested in how one could even think of giving magic such a form. When the main character saw the prince, she said that he finally came and calmed this tiger cub down, and he asks if they have become friends. The girl screams and asks where he was, and wonders how he could leave her alone with this beast. The little girl understands that, of course, she is glad that he looks rested, but she thinks that she no longer wants to be alone with the tiger, at least until they become friends, and then tells him not to leave him with him anymore. Khalid informs that he has some suggestions, and that this is an addition to her main task, and that they will have to perform the blessing together. The girl asks in surprise what she will have to do. He answers that nothing special, and she just needs to be near him because that is enough. The main character assumed that Arena's people were superstitious, but she didn't think that it was so much, because it was all for the sake of the ceremony of receiving a blessing. The prince informs them that very soon they will cross the border of the Iron Empire, and if they do not perform the ceremony and ask for the blessing of the Lord of the Seas, they could get caught in a storm, and if they are really unlucky, they will lose their way home forever. Hearing this, the little girl thought that it seemed like he was hiding her and didn't know if it was normal that now all the crew members would see her, although he understood that everything was going well, and this was somehow suspicious. His Majesty asks if she's worried, and Lei asks why she should be worried, since he himself said she doesn't need to do anything, and at that moment, she wonders if he really wants to do this in front of the maids. The prince explains that everyone is nervous before meeting the Lord of the Seas, and then announces that he will be stepping aside for now. At this point, the lady doesn't understand what she expected and believes there's no need to think about unnecessary things, because she simply needs to play her role and work hard. Khalid announces that his bride will also be participating in this ceremony, and Simon asks if this will be too much of a shock for her. The gentleman believes that sometimes it is simply necessary to shock people so that they begin to show their feelings. The main character understands that this is her first time out, and she really missed the fresh air, but she became curious about the strange sounds that attracted her attention. The girl realized that thousands of people bowed before her, and this roar was generated by people kneeling. And at that time, she remembered the words of the master, that no one doubted the correctness of the crown prince's decision. And everyone wants to look at the prince's bride, but no one dares to raise their head without permission. Lacey looked at the night sky and realized that it was very beautiful, and then she took a step because she understood that it was a little scary, and if she froze, everyone would continue to stand with their heads down. The maid put a cape on her mistress, and the lady thought that this cape was so thin but warm, and understood that this was another magical item. The little girl thinks that it doesn't matter that he is the crown prince of the empire, but she became interested in where so much wealth came from and how much he has in total. A few minutes later, the main character looked at the tiger and did not understand why they were alone again, and then asked why he was looking at her so intently. The main character thought that she should be the perfect bride, and believes that such a bride would react to the tiger in approximately the same way, and she believes that she simply should not look at him and think that there is no one there. The prince saw that Mr. Zephyr had approached her, and he had never seen him be friendly with anyone except his master. Of course, Simon believes that she will definitely become the crown prince's wife. At this time, the girl does not understand why he is still next to her, and she is in tears of fear because she is not used to such a big cat always being next to her. Lei tells the prince to hurry up because he needs something other than money, and moral support would be very useful right now. The knight says, His Highness has arrived, and the blessing ceremony is about to begin. The woman suggests looking at the crown prince, who looks like the ruler of the seas himself. The gentleman touched the lady's hand and said that it was warm, and she was relieved, and then said that for a moment he thought he had made a mistake, but now he understands that he chose her for a reason. The little girl looked at the jewelry and realized that she had never seen such riches, and she began to wonder if they were taking it so seriously. Lacey, surprised, says that all this isn't something you can prepare for in just a day, and she's sure many have worked tirelessly, and that she should do something too. The prince reminds her that he told her to simply be by his side. Khalid tells the little girl not to be afraid of anything, but at that time, she thought about whether she should be surprised or afraid, and then she saw the maids, and it seemed to her that they were somehow unusual. Suddenly, the sea raged, and the girl asked if it was a tsunami. The gentleman hugged her and said he was with her. The main character understands that the situation was becoming more and more unclear, but one thing was clear: something from under the water was looking right at them, and she thinks that Khalid doesn't seem to be worried at all. Suddenly, there was silence, and the prince asked if everything was all right. The maids began singing a song, and the girl saw that he had no sword or armor, but she truly felt safe with him. Khalid orders her to open up, but the little girl doesn't understand what he's doing as his gaze is frightening. He takes her hand and asks her to watch closely. Lei understands that back then, she didn't yet know the true meaning of the blessing ceremony and considered it just another superstition, and she couldn't even imagine what kind of creature she would have to face. That very day, she encountered a side of herself that she had not even suspected, because she did not know about it then. But everything became clear only after a long time, and perhaps that creature knew her better than she did. His Majesty reports that they have finally arrived in the Iran Empire. The main character heard the song and reflects on the fact that she doesn't know the language or the words, but somehow she understands everything. Suddenly, he raised his head and said that a piece of her lives in each of them, and this is the sun illuminating their future. Lacey thinks that something tells her that this creature understands the whole message of the song, and then says that it is somehow strange, and the prince greets her and congratulates her because they have finally arrived in the Empire of Irony. Khalid explains that everything is fine because Her Highness has been blessed, and this is a blessing that is given once in a lifetime. The little girl says she'd like to clarify a few things, but first he suggests letting her go. She insists she's perfectly fine and just wants him to put her down for a minute because she needs to talk to him. The lady turns to the prince and states that they need to talk alone and asks if he understands. Simon tells the princess that it is better for her to stay with His Highness for now because it will be a little difficult for her now, but her relationship with the prince can calm down a lot and come to its senses after the ceremony. The main character asks what's on his hand, and he replies that it's his Taru, and that it appeared because they've already crossed the border. She says she understands, and then asks what connection they were talking about. The man explains that their magical powers complement each other, and therefore one simply needs to be near the prince to feel better, and all the inhabitants of the empire possess it. Khalid tells his assistant that it's already late at night, and he thinks it's time for him to go. Then he explains that Irina is the end of the magic empire. Believe me, he needs to rest. He suggests Simon eat, drink some water, and entertain himself somehow. He says he understands and leaves. The little girl says she's now curious about the border's communications and magic. The assistant says he'll be brief, and then explains that the borders are indeed different from the lands of the Iran Empire and the Weldon Kingdom. At first, in the lands near Weldon, they are not imbued with magic at all, but as they approach Iran and their concentration increases, the magic begins to increase. Their ship recently crossed a point where the magic in the air is sufficient to support the Taru. The girl asks what kind of creature they recently saw. He explains that it was a dragon, the ruler of the seas, who maintains the balance of magic in the ocean, and the entire water surface is his territory, and this dragon is called Aegir. The man explains that, in fact, the dragon rarely shows its true form, and usually people see only a blurry shadow, but it seems that he is interested in hers. Halit says that she should now rest and calm down, but thanks to someone this will no longer happen, and then says that that's enough for today, and the rest will be tomorrow. The little girl wondered if he'd definitely tell her everything tomorrow. Hearing this, Simon thought that she'd taken it all quite calmly and was so interested in everything, which was why he thought she'd adapt quickly to life in Surabray. The assistant says that of course, but only he today, and the gentleman interrupts him and takes the girl in his arm and claims that now she needs to rest. The prince tells the girl he'll leave so she can get a good night's sleep, but the lady asks if it would be better if she left, as she understands he can't sleep here because of her. She explains that this is his cabin after all, and she's just a guest. The guy asks in surprise what she is talking about, and the lady replies that she is talking about indifference to her partner and explains that it is all a game, and she is not his partner or a couple, so she should know her place. The little girl says that she can leave and let him just speak. The young gentleman tells her to stop, then moves closer to her and asks her to look at him and say all this while looking him straight in the eye. Khalid claims that she is his partner, and he has no other woman, and if he said no, then it means there really is no one, and therefore there is no need to invent anything extra, because she can always ask him a question. The prince apologizes for being so abrupt, and then suggests she rest. The girl asks him to wait, but at that moment, she thinks she doesn't know why she did it, but she simply didn't want to hurt him. Lee clearly saw that her words hurt him, and there was a feeling that she should not have done this to him, and then she goes up to the guy and kisses him. The young man asks her in surprise what she just did, and the girl explains that she apologized. He says that he doesn't know how she feels about this act, but there's never been anyone else besides him. No matter how much time passes, this remains the same. The prince explains that the bracelet does indeed have special functions, but he gave it to her as the most ordinary jewelry, thinking that it would fit her perfectly, and neither he nor the priests told her about it. The little girl realized that all those girls were priestesses, and then says that she is so glad that she was wrong, and the young master thinks that, therefore, it is not she who should apologize, but he. The main character understands that her heart was beating madly when he looked into her eyes asking for permission, and when he took her in his arms, she was finally able to understand what her heart wants. His Majesty asks what he should do with her, because he can no longer restrain himself. At this point, the young lady thought that this was bound to happen sooner or later, and she braced herself for the unusual sensations, and even pain. However, she realized she shouldn't have to endure it, because in fact, she was really looking forward to it. Khalid thinks it's fortunate that their agreement and relationship are so cleverly intertwined, and therefore, he will probably take advantage of the moment. Lacey realizes that as soon as his breath touched her hands, her fingers began to bend on their own, so gentle and slow, as if he was teasing her. The man says he still doesn't know her real name, and the girl replies that she's Lay. The prince says, of course Lay is a given name, and then suggests she not hold back and tell him her name. Lying in bed, the little girl says that she fell, and then wonders if people didn't think she was weak, because she understands that first impressions are especially important, and she fell right in front of everyone. Khalid claims that she did it completely, and was even too good, and she also fell right into his arms and asks if she remembers it. The gentleman reminds her that Simon himself told her that the dragon does not show its true form to everyone, and believes that no one could be better than her, and therefore suggests not to forget that she is unique. Madame explains to the Count that as she had already said earlier, she too doesn't know her whereabouts. He reports that he searched the entire capital, but found no traces, and then asks who, if not them, and their men could have pulled off such a thing. The gentleman claims screaming that they had planned everything from the very beginning, and asks if this is true. The woman asks what nonsense this is, since she believes that she has fulfilled all the points of the contract, and moreover, has done even more than required, and then asks who dares to tell her anything. Madame reminds him that he even tried to kill her, because she was too good, and then says that her children do not contradict her, and follow her orders without question, and therefore says that he should not even dare to reproach her for anything. The woman says she'd like to bring back such a good actress herself. The man claims she's wanted, and can no longer act so. He suggests simply imagining her falling into an eternal sleep, believing she's dead anyway, as she's wanted everywhere. The lady says that this is great news, and then thanks him for helping her maintain her reputation, and calls him a dear client. The Count says that he is here to place a new order, and then says that he wants neither Veronica nor her actress to ever appear in this country again. Hearing this, the woman thought that Lacey had done a great job with him, and then asked what reward he was offering her. The man reminds her that the bounty on Veronica's head has already been announced, and that he will give it to her and her men. The lady says it's accepted then, thanks him, and hopes they'll use their services again in the future. When the man left, the woman thought that Count Hillsteel was a rather strange person, but none of her children had ever earned more than Lacey, and she wanted to make her her successor. The woman looked at the wanted poster and thought that Lacey should not take it personally, since she believes that business is business and nothing personal, and they are obliged to work for the benefit of their clients. The red-haired lady asks the young gentleman what he plans to do now, and also wonders if he will silently eavesdrop like that. The man says that she probably already knows, and then agrees with his sister that he was eavesdropping and therefore suggests not to worry since he was not visible. The woman thought that he was a sneak and then asked if she was ashamed to rummage through someone else's underwear. The guy says that if she didn't want this, she shouldn't have interfered in his affairs in the first place, and then asks where Lacey is. The madam tells the mentor that this girl is not his, and simply offers to answer the question, and then asks if he thinks that if she knew she would not have told him about her whereabouts. The lady understands that he heard the count's threats against her, but still does not believe that she really does not know where this girl is, and does not understand why he is so obsessed with her. The man tells his sister he knows she's the only person who could help her disappear. She agrees, saying the problem is that the situation has gotten out of control, and the cabin they prepared for her remains empty, and it doesn't remind her of anyone. The guy hugs his sister and says that she is right here, because he believes that everything will be fine with Lacey, and when they meet again, he will definitely congratulate her. But it is interesting whether Lacey will be looking forward to this meeting. The man says that he also has a little business, and if Lacey shows up, he asks her to let him know about it right away, and then offers to believe her, because a decent payment awaits her. The lady reflected on how busy the day had been, and how he'd never been easygoing. She was even surprised that her brother had been so accommodating today, and she thought he had no information about the girl. The woman knows that the earring she gave to Lacey can not only change a person's appearance, it also allows her to find out where she is, and she is glad that only she has this opportunity, but she will take this secret with her to the grave. Madame reflects on how, as her best student, she has surely learned the lesson that it is better to be able to stab someone in the back than to blindly trust and be betrayed. At this time, the prince says that she still trusted him a little, and if she didn't want them to get closer, she could have simply drawn the line. The guy reflects on how he was barely holding back, but her kiss finally broke his willpower. He realizes that the girl initially acted as if she had no intention of claiming him, but then she kissed him as if she needed it herself, and today they became closer. Khalid thinks that even if this kiss and laughter were fake, his heart started dancing, but he understands that this happened even earlier when she presented herself to everyone in all her splendor and looked at him without taking her eyes off, and his world stopped, and yet her moans gave her away. The man understands that she makes his heart flutter just by being near her, but for her, he is not an acquaintance who has not earned her trust. The guy knows that everything happened 10 years ago when the little girl asked him to promise that he would pick her up in 10 years. Just a few words that later became his salvation and curse. At the same time, because he understands that time has passed, the assistant approaches His Highness and informs him that he needs to go downstairs for a moment. The gentleman asks what happened, and he informs him that the prisoner committed suicide. The prince says that this is enough and offers to tell the rest on the way. While the main character was sleeping, she had a dream and said she had to leave. A man with red hair approached Lacey and said that this was wonderful because she had learned all the basics and therefore suggested she never forget them while working. The man tells her that she should use these techniques only when she needs to tease and provoke the client, while always remembering that she should not get close to the client under any circumstances, and then suggests repeating everything from the very beginning. The main character says that she has to leave and she needs to run, but the gentleman suggests that she speak too slowly, and then asks if he taught her this. Meanwhile, the prince wonders how this happened, and the assistant explains that she bit off her tongue. Khalid wonders what idiot removed the gag from her mouth. Simon says that the guards saw the wine and realized that it was perfectly aged, and then they decided to try it and drink to the successful completion of the ceremony, and in general, to all the good things in life. The man suggests they drink more slowly, knowing that if they're caught, they might get away with more than just losing their pay. The guard points out that others are drinking too. The man looked at the captive and confused assumed she was nauseous, so he decided to remove the gag. He suggested she wait, as he'd be done quickly. The knight says that she has not yet been fully interrogated, and if she dies now, it will be the end for them. His Majesty asks if he says they did it out of joy, because he is returning home after 2 years of wandering. Simon says that he is very sorry, because it is his fault that he did not keep an eye on them, and he believes that if he had been more attentive, this would not have happened. His Majesty suggests not to blame himself, since he is already working hard, and claims that it is not his fault, and then says that he is sure that she has an accomplice. The gentleman understands that it is useless to interrogate them now, since they were drunk, and it is impossible to punish them harshly for that. The knight says he's to blame. Then he explains that Master Simon keeps insisting it's his fault, but they got drunk and messed up because he realizes they were supposed to be guarding the prisoner and shouldn't have been drinking at all. The assistant turns to the man and says that he hasn't even tried a drop of alcohol and says that he still allowed this to happen, and they are ready to take responsibility for what happened. Khalid understands that they have been away from home for so long, and everyone has worked hard to catch the traitor, and he talks about him too, but the past can no longer be brought back, so he simply suggests starting all over again, and will look for new leads. Hearing this, the knight, surprised, asks what new clues he's talking about. The master explains that she had an accomplice, and that's obvious, and then asks why she committed suicide instead of trying to escape. The man asks if he wants to say it wasn't suicide, but that she was killed as soon as they crossed the border. The prince asks why now. Simon assumes that she wanted to use magic, and the gentleman claims that then he would have noticed residual traces of it, because in any case, they would begin an investigation. The assistant says they'll take care of everything with the Sanhan and suggests he go see Her Highness the Princess. The gentleman insists they can't relax until they've finally crossed the border, as there are still mutants. Khalid understands that while they were in Weldon, everything was quiet, but he does not think that attacks will happen anytime soon, and besides, he is the only one who has a full-fledged Teru, and therefore he will react quickly if danger awaits them. Sinakan says that he still doesn't have it, and the gentleman suggests assigning security to Lanahan, because for some reason he's sure that she'll do something. The assistant says that this is an excellent solution, and the knight says that this is very good, because this way she will not be able to get into trouble. Khalid tells his assistant that if this happens again, he'll have to answer, then asks if he understands, and tugs at his cheek. At that moment, the man realized his master was angry after all. The woman says that she does not feel any living energy, and considers it a pity, but she understands that she must try hard to make the owner happy. The lady says that the mother realized that it was not in vain that she carried her, because her baby will soon be born. A week later, the main character sitting on the deck realizes that the bright sun and the cool breeze and the calm and quiet waves and the weather are simply magnificent. She thinks that such a walk is every person's dream. While in the cabin, the girl realized that a comfortable temperature and humidity were always maintained there, and all this was thanks to the magic of the Iron Empire, and now she could even furnish the cabin to her taste. The little girl can't believe that this previously gloomy place can look so luxurious. Sanahan asks if she is ready to start their lesson today, and the lady says that of course she is ready. Lacey says that there are only 4 elements of magic that a person can possess, but even if people possess magic of the same type, their abilities may differ slightly, and then asks if this is correct. The girl understands that she will understand and remember everything in order to later use it against them, and she shows maximum curiosity, diligence, and a thirst for knowledge. The lady wonders if he has mastery over the element of water and can calm people and heal them. The master claims everything is correct, but she says the Teru is created in the image of its master. The girl reflects on how he is kind and non-confrontational, which is why the snake looks cute, and she thinks this is quite convenient. Lee says that he couldn't use his powers when he was in Weldon, and then asks why. The man explains that this is necessary for the balance between the 2 continents, and he already mentioned that the central continent is a land that has lost magic, but in Irina it is still alive. But all this, of course, is the consequence of whose choice. The Lord says he will replace everyone for her, the dragon that guards the border, the tree that has taken root in the very center of the earth, the great spirit of the north, and the sacred fresh greenery that lives in the castle of thorns. They were chosen to maintain balance on the earth and influence its future. The Guardians have stripped the central continent of magic, so all living beings are forbidden from using magic outside of Uranus. Simon reports that people can, of course, cross borders and travel to another continent, but only on the condition that they do not use magic. The main character wonders if the prince can manifest his Teru outside of Irina's realm. Irina finds this simply astounding. The assistant agrees, and then asserts that His Highness is so strong that his tiger is almost lifelike. Hearing this, the girl does not understand what it means, and if she could only make him sleep constantly, she would feel safe, but she knows that, until recently, she lived in constant fear. Air is Khalid's element, so the little girl is a little surprised, as it seemed like Earth suited him better. He is serious, hot, and majestic, like a scorching sandy desert, heated by the midday sun. Simon says that he is very glad that she liked this place and explains that he could not bring her here earlier due to various circumstances. Lacey says that there are, of course, no windows in the Khalid's cabin, but she felt quite comfortable there, and she believes that their ship is steeped in magic and that its filling is probably even more magical than wood. The assistant says that she can rest here from time to time because no one will see her, but she will be able to observe many. At this time, the main character understands that now she is not shaking from everything that she sees for the first time, and on the contrary, all this novelty gives her strength. Simon announces that they're done for the day. Grandfather asks her to explain something, since she understood everything, but she has neither magic nor teru. Then he asks how she can be the bride of the great Khalid. The man tells her she has one, and the girl, surprised, asks what kind. He explains that she was born and lived on another continent, so she hasn't made herself known yet, but he assures Her Highness that she definitely has power and that he felt it, and then informs her that her element is water. Hearing this, the little girl was surprised and thought that it was not that she did not want to believe it, but the gentleman explained that until now she would hardly have been able to feel it herself. The assistant believes that very soon she will begin to notice changes in herself, and most importantly, she is not afraid of anything, especially the unknown, and the power itself, and her magic can awaken at any moment. Simon advises her not to overdo it, as he believes it will only harm her. He knows that fortunately, the lady is emotionally stable and calm, and excessive use of magic puts a lot of strain on the human body. The man says that magic is also closely connected to her emotions, and positive emotions are a future blessing, while negative ones are a dangerous weapon. Lacey states that she will be careful, and then asks how she can feel the magic and create her own teru. Simon explains that everything happened on its own, and then recalls that in childhood, when he was still surrounded by his family, the girl does not understand why his voice began to fade towards the end of the sentence. The gentleman says he thinks she should turn to His Highness the Crown Prince for help, and she asks in surprise why she can't go to him. He, crying out, replies that she definitely can't go to him because he believes she needs to get closer to him. The girl understands that this means something has to do with her family, and she doesn't know what to do. The man, however, insists that, besides, she has an excellent relationship with His Highness. The main character reflects on the fact that she does not know her father, but she has many good memories of her mother, because she worked hard and was a good person, but she did not feel anything special even when she kissed her or took her in her arms. Lacey says she was born in Weldon, and there's been no magic there for a long time. He says that's okay, since many people used to live in their empire. Hearing this, the girl does not understand whether this means that he is questioning her origin, and then says that it turns out that she needs to turn to Khalid for help, because now he is the only person close to hers. The lady asks if it's okay that they have diametrically opposed elements. The man explains that it's true, but suddenly they hear some strange sounds and wonder what's going on. Sanahan screams, asking for forgiveness for frightening Her Highness, and therefore kneels and asks for forgiveness. Simon asks what happened this time, and the main character asks if she's okay. He says he thinks she should be dunked in seawater, or maybe hung upside down from the mast, then suggests she could also be put in an oak barrel overnight. The girl says that she agrees to everything and will not even resist, so she asks to choose the punishment that seems best to her. Hearing this, Lacey thought that she was so submissive, and at that time, she felt the magical item of option. The main character understands that it did not work before due to the lack of magic, but after crossing the border, its magic came into effect again, because she was able to understand the lyrics of the song thanks to it. Lay reflects on how she now understands everyone. 10 minutes ago, she asked the master if water and wind could be compatible. He replies that not quite, but that she and His Highness are special, and at that moment they heard strange sounds. Sanahan asks where they are running off to cowards, and then screaming announces that she will smear their brains right on their stupid embers, because she believes that they must follow the orders of the commander-in-chief clearly and without objection. Hearing this, the main character thought that this girl was sharp-tongued, and also so lively, because she even felt a little sorry for these guys, but also had fun at the same time. Lay asks if her body is her teru. The man claims that Her Highness asked her a question, and therefore she should be kind enough to answer. She replies that it is so. Hearing this, the girl thought that this is what teru looks like before he has acquired his full forms. Simon says that her punishment will be announced later, and Lay touches the girl's hair and says that it does not look like fiery wings, but he thinks that it is very beautiful. Sinahan looked at the lady and thought that she so wanted to see her, but she was always at a great distance, and now she was so close. The lady says that she thought the flame would burn her, but it is very warm, and then asks, what is the name of the person with such wonderful fiery wings, and wonders if she is one of Khalid's personal knights. Hearing this, the girl thought that she did not possess any kind of charming magic, and she did not think that people from Weldon could be kind. The lady asks if she's okay having seen the girl crying. She replies that her name is Lanahan, and says that her body may sometimes fail her, but she would like to become her personal knight. Hearing this, His Highness's assistant does not understand what the crown prince is like, and then says that Irina does not have such a concept as a knight, and then asks where she picked up such a thing, and also wonders if she is joking. The girl screamed, insisting that they must protect the mistress as well as the crown prince. Hearing this, the man thought he was going crazy, because he wondered if she was up to her old tricks again. Lanahan asks the lady to allow him to devote his life to her. Simon, surprised, asks if she's forgotten that she's the commander of the border service, while the girl pretends not to hear. The prince asks if there's any news from the guards. The knight reports that there haven't been any new reports, as they've searched everywhere, but found nothing. The gentleman thinks that this is strange, because it is impossible to do something without leaving traces, and then one of two things. Either she really was alone, or her accomplice was smart. Sinahan asks to start searching for the accomplice, right now. The prince says it's curious that they haven't encountered a single mutant since the day Ganja died, because they've beefed up security. Since then, all the mutants have seemingly vanished. Khalid reports that he is glad that there have been no incidents so far, but this is no reason to relax, and they must not forget to pay special attention to patrolling until they reach Iran. No one on the ship should be harmed. The priestesses say that they previously hid her from everyone because she could not stand out and attract the attention of the crew, but now that the blessing ceremony was successful, she can finally officially live with the crown prince in his cabin, and therefore offers to dress her. Lacey thanks them for taking care of her outfit, and then says that lately she hasn't seen His Highness at all. The priestess says that His Highness is busy day and night, and they believe that this is not right, and that it is necessary to tell Mr. Simon about this, because he probably has a reason for his eternal busyness. The lady screaming insists that this is no reason to leave her alone. Meanwhile, the girl thought that it seemed better when she didn't understand their words, and still doesn't understand why these priestesses are serving her at all. The madam announces that she is pleased to finally greet the lady properly, and then reveals that her name is Sui, and that she is a water priestess. Huai announces that she is a fire priestess, and Jai announces that she is an earth priestess. Hearing this, the main character realizes that they did not look like ordinary maids. Sway reports that in Weldon, there are what they call oracles. The lady says that even aristocrats have difficulty meeting them, and at this point, she can't understand how she could have mistaken them for servants. The priestess says that they do not worship a god, but the elements of water, fire, air, and earth, and each of them worships one element and carries a particle of it within themselves. So no matter how far and long the prince's journey is, he is always accompanied by priestesses, and they receive the blessing of poetry and contribute to the successful course of the journey. Hearing this, the little girl thought that this was true, because she didn't even have seasickness, and then asked where the air was. Sway replies that His Highness is the High Priest of Air, and one of their tasks is to take care of the comfort of the High Priest, so now their primary responsibility is her comfort, Her Highness. Lei says that these are his responsibilities, and she doesn't think she can influence it in any way. The girl understands what it means that he was present at the ceremony also as the High Priest, and he probably has a lot of worries and responsibilities. The priestesses suggest the mistress go to the dining room. The main character wonders if she has to dress like this every time, realizing it's almost night. Hoyt believes that these magical attributes will help her get used to them faster, and then asks if she is uncomfortable in them. The baby understands that she is quite comfortable, and then says that everything is fine, and at this time, she thought that she was just already worried about what else awaits her after all this, because she was especially confused after understanding the function of the bracelets. Tiger asks the master why he's alone again, since he thinks he should have stayed with her. Khalid says he was going to tell her the same thing and wanted to ask him to stay with her. Zephyr claims that she is not like everyone else. Because of her water powers, he constantly falls asleep and therefore asks to do something about it because he believes that he should help her awaken her powers and teach her to control them. The gentleman says that it's enough complaining and calls him grandfather and the cat screams and tells him not to call him that. Khalid thinks that he has already done a lot, but the tiger claims that this is not enough and that they need to end this here before they reach the Empire. Zephyr asks if they'll all be safer once her powers awaken. The master tells him to stop grumbling as he's already trying his best and then pets the cat. Suddenly, the prince saw the monster and then used his weapon and finished off the mutant. The knight fearfully asks His Highness if he is okay, as he understands that he is already exhausted, and asks if they should call the advisor and let them tell him about the mutant. Khalid announces that he's finished and it's best to check the perimeter. The guard says he got so close they didn't even notice him, and the master orders them to beef up security and keep everyone on guard. Zephyr says that they are approaching the Empire, and that is why the mutants are infiltrating, and the prince says that this is not usually the case, and therefore asks if he will agree with him. Tiger knows he doesn't usually let them get this close, and then asks if the gentleman is tired. He replies that his thoughts have been preoccupied with other things lately. Zephyr offers to listen to what he has to say, and then says that if he helps her develop her strength, she can become her support in future battles. Khalid claims that this will not happen because he did not bring her, so that she would share his burden with him. At this time, the main character became interested in how much time had already passed and why he was making her wait for so long, and assumed that he probably caught all these fish himself. The girl thinks that she probably missed him because they hadn't seen each other for several days. Suddenly, Anahan entered the room and asked for forgiveness if he had disturbed her, and then told Her Highness that she was always alone there, and that was why he had come out and was embarrassed. The man says that frequent interaction with different people can help her awaken her magical powers. The woman invites him in as she's just feeling bored on her own. The girl asks why he's standing there and then offers to sit down. The man, surprised, asks if he dares. Lacey says that the one who used to keep her company won't be coming today anyway. The knight reports that Her Highness defeated a mutant today, and then realizes he shouldn't have said that, and suggests that if His Highness finds out he's made her worry, she'll be worried. The lady asks what he said, and Sanakan replies that nothing, and therefore suggests enjoying the food. Lacey looked at the guy and said they really do look alike, though she understands it's natural, after all they're twins. He says the Lanahans are always a source of trouble, and then asks why they look alike. The man asks Her Highness for forgiveness for her behavior, but she claims that there is no need for this, because she even likes her impulsive nature. The girl says they have similar looks, but completely different personalities. He reminds her that the woman said she liked Lanahan's personality, and does that mean he likes hers? Laves Krikivaya explains that she didn't mean it that way, and at that time, she thought that they really do look alike, and then asks the guy if he is also a knight. Sanahan replies that he's not exactly a knight. Well, something like that. The main character asks why the knight set out on a long voyage with his country's prince. The man explains that the thing is that he and Lenohan are not from a wealthy family, and as soon as they started working for His Highness, many began to have a negative attitude towards them. Lay claims they're both so talented. The knight says it doesn't matter, and if he's from a lower class, he'll be treated accordingly. You're the only one who protected them and didn't care about their background. His Highness the Crown Prince. Sanahan says that in order not to let down the Crown Prince and his faith in them, in order to repay him for all his kindness, he boarded this ship, and no matter what His Highness decides, no matter what journey he sets out on, he will always follow him. Hearing this, the girl understood why he was so strict with Lanahan, and then said that she was sure that the Crown Prince was not mistaken in them, and said that maybe he himself did not notice it, but she was sure that everyone else saw that he and Lanahan were superior to everyone else in fencing skills. Sanahan turns to Her Highness and says that perhaps he will disappoint her now, because in fact there is another reason why he ended up on this ship. Hearing this, the lady became curious about what he was talking about and wanted to hear it. The man explained that for a time, complete chaos reigned in the Iran Empire. The Goths had a thriving slave trade, and many children were sold into slavery on another continent. Lee wonders if this is about Weldon. He replies that's exactly how they lost their sister when they were kids. The main character, hearing this, was surprised and said that she could not even imagine that everything was so sad, and then asked to forgive her. Sanahan claims that everything is fine because now she knows everything, and for these two cities, they searched the entire kingdom, but they still couldn't find their sister, and therefore they hope that by the will of fate they will meet again one day. The princess looked at the man and asked if they had met before. He claimed he had met her for the first time on this ship, and she said she felt strange because he seemed familiar. The lady explains that she hadn't been quite up to it before, but now that she's crossed the border and feels safe, this feeling has intensified, and she's sure they've already encountered each other somewhere. At this point, Simon enters the room screaming and asking what all this inappropriate talk is about. The lady says she's glad to see him, then reminds him that they haven't seen each other at all lately. The gentleman asks what she just said to Sanakan, and also wonders if this is called flirting in her country. The girl explains it's a joke, and then asks why he even thought that. The knight thinks flirting is probably a form of eating. Simon asks if he's wrong, and then claims she's forbidden from doing so because she shouldn't show romantic attention to anyone except the crown prince. Lei objects and claims that everything was not like that at all, and the knight says that perhaps he will go and thank for the food, which was very tasty. The lady asks her to wait for him. The girl follows him, but he's so fast and realizes she's no match for him. The princess turns to Simon and claims that he got it all wrong, and therefore now suggests that he deal with all the consequences. The gentleman explains that he has encountered similar phrases before, and therefore suggests taking a break from this chatter. Tiger says that Her Highness should now first of all think about awakening her power, and therefore time cannot be wasted, because now she and Halit need to be together as much time as possible, and they need to get closer, and therefore suggests not to force him to say everything directly because he is embarrassed. Lei asks the assistant if the Teru can talk, and then the girl realized that he wasn't just talking, but that she felt as if he was speaking to her in a lecturing tone. Simon explains that it's not just the marshmallow that's special, but that it's further proof of the prince's power. The tiger asks why they're both so reluctant to mate. Hearing this, the main character can't understand why he's speaking to her so rudely. Zephyr says she needs to mate to awaken her magical powers. The girl screams, saying this tiger, and then asks where he's sticking his face. Simon explains that the thing is that he doesn't understand Zephyr's speech very well, but he's still interested in what he said to her. Lei explains that he wants her to awaken her magic sooner, and the master apologizes as they've apparently all told her about it often. The girl looked at the marshmallow and thought about what he'd said, and moved on with a light heart. Then she said that lately everyone's been talking about how she needs to awaken her Simon priestess magic, and even that tiger. The princess wonders what will happen when her magic is strong enough. The man explains that the natural bond will strengthen. The main character says that in fact, she has been feeling very insecure lately, and she hasn't seen Khalid for several days, and realizes that she misses him. Lei reflects on the fact that at first, she worries about him, and then suddenly her soul becomes very nasty, and she does not understand whether this is possible because of a natural connection, because she suddenly begins to feel more comfortable around a person. Lanahan reports that this happens to him and the twins in general. Simon, surprised, asks the guy why he has such a bad habit. At this time, the main character thought that, on the other hand, for some reason, she felt comfortable here from the very beginning, and she wondered if this was connected specifically with him. The gentleman explains that the magical powers of twins are very compatible, so it seems that they complement each other perfectly. Lanahan says that sometimes he irritates or upsets many people, but not Senecan, or for example, he is very talkative with him, although he is usually quiet, and they are like halves of a whole, and they are comfortable with each other. The princess reflects on the fact that she has never met such a person before, and she always felt a little uneasy with everyone, even with Madame the One, with whom she had been in close contact for a long time, because she was a rival next to whom she lost self-confidence, and therefore could not trust anyone at all. The girl became curious, whether it meant that she was comfortable with Khalid, and then wondered if this didn't cause any inconvenience, since it turned out that because of this natural connection, he couldn't be objective. The knight says that in any case, developing one's magic cannot be a bad decision, and then says that Sanahan has been a model student since childhood, but it is better not to mention his magical skills, and simply say that he has always had to rely on Sanahan. Lanahan reports that even now, although her Teru is still not formed, it is much better than what was before, and therefore, she believes that it is better to start as soon as possible. Simon thought that he should remain neutral, because he is their Cupid, and then asks her if her natural connection only gets stronger in bed, because he believes that the most important thing is the manifestation of sincere feelings. The princess says that she still needs to make every effort to curb her magic, and to do this, she needs to start by controlling her thoughts, and therefore asks to convey to the crown prince that she needs his help and support. Lei understands that they have an agreement and believes that feelings should not be mixed with work. Sanahan Viskrivaya says that he too will begin practicing more to become a worthy knight for her. The lady believes that he is already a worthy knight, and that she always relies on him. The knight claims that no matter who or what they say, he will always be on her side, and at that time, he thought that she is very devoted and gentle. Halit turns to the girl and says, "She's so good at charming his people." The man asks His Highness if he's come, and the prince wonders if he hasn't already promised to give his life for her. The woman explains that there's simply one now, so she's barely lying to them. His Majesty thinks it's not worth gossiping about the prince in his presence, and then asks if she doesn't think she should leave. At this point, the main character wondered if the Colette had sent them away, so she wouldn't be lonely. The men left, and she said they were alone. The prince explains that this room was originally intended for just the two of them, and the lady reports that lately, she's felt as if she's had it all to herself. His Majesty explains that he sent Simon to her, and then the twins, and asked the priestesses to be more attentive to her, and then asks if that wasn't enough for her. The girl claims that they are quite enough, and then thanks him, and at that time she thought that she does not understand why he is so slow-witted. The man tells her not to worry, because he won't disturb her rest for long, since he'll have to leave again soon. The little girl was surprised to hear this. The princess says that she understands that he is busy with important matters, but even the priestesses are worried, because they think that they have become very distant from each other. Halit asks if the distance between them bothers her too. She replies that, of course, because it's part of their agreement. Then she asks what will happen to Lanahan now. He says she can consider himself her knight for now. His Majesty says she will have an escort in arena, but it won't be her, and that's not up for discussion. The lady says she's sorry because she's talented too. Lei explains that in her country, there are practically no female knights, and most women simply do not own weapons. Because of this, they sometimes have a hard time, and she also respects her, and thinks her Teru will be strong. The lady asks if he knows the legend of the phoenix. Born in fire and embraced by it, this bird rises again and again from the ashes. The girl says that she thought that Lanahan Teru would look like a phoenix, but what she has now is very reminiscent of phoenix wings, and then asks the guy why he is looking at her like that. The prince says that this is an interesting point of view, because usually everyone considers her weak because she has poor control over her magic. Lei reminds him that he said she was the commander, but then asks if a weak person could become one. He replies that, of course, not because she's physically strong, but his first impression of her isn't the most flattering. Hearing this, the main character says that she did not take it seriously, and he says that they will look into it because she was special since childhood. The little girl asks him in surprise why he's making such a conclusion. He explains that he just assumed, then stands up, and she asks if he's leaving. Khalid says that he has to go, and then says that she has such a displeased expression on her face right now, and that's why he simply has to touch it, and then wishes her kind words and kisses her. When the girl was left alone, she thought that she wanted to ask him to help her with awakening magic, but as soon as he touched her, she lost the power of speech. Lacey is wondering if she can ask Simon or Lanahan for help in awakening magic. The priestesses suggest turning to the crown prince with this request, as they understand that she should not get too close to these two. Sui says that she has an idea, and then asks if she should try increasing its quantity, since this method is often used in Cereber when training children. The priestess explains that when a child interacts with the magic of different people, it not only strengthens the Terra, but also helps them better control their magic. Jan reports that Lanahan used this method, but believes that if she finds out that she was put on the same level as children, she will definitely be angry. The main character wonders if this will cause trouble for anyone. Lacey thanks the prince for showing her such a beautiful view. He explains that he thought it would be nice to get some fresh air before arriving. The little girl wonders if they'll get in anyone's way. His Majesty informs her that the entire ship is largely controlled by magic, so nothing can interfere with its voyage, and he keeps a close eye on everyone, ensuring no one shirks their work. The princess asks if he took her with him to be together. He asks in surprise if she wanted to be alone. The girl objects and explains that she thought he was very busy, and the man explains that it's not about managing the ship, and besides, she's not against it, and that's the main thing. The protagonist asks if he's been spending all his time here, and he replies that he has and will stay here until he arrives. She asks why, since he said magic would protect the ship. Halit says they're approaching the Empire, and therefore need to tell her something. At that moment, Zephyr approaches them and glares angrily at the master. The prince pets the tiger and explains that the time has come, and he must tell her. The people exclaim in surprise that the gorge is now visible, and that their homeland is finally very close. His Majesty says that beyond this gorge lies the Empire of Iran, and then asks if she is ready. The Golden State, surrounded by the deserts of Irene, is a place where the sun rises and shines brightly in this part of the world, like another world. Suddenly, there was a lot of fire, and the gentleman said that this was too much for a greeting, and the girl said smiling that she survived. The prince asks if she's okay and isn't hurt anywhere. The little girl insists she's fine, thanks to His Majesty. Suddenly, a loud roar is heard on the deck, and a man appears who addresses Halit and says that he was sure that he had already gone to another world because he had been gone for a long time. The main character realized that this prince was a caliph, and she became interested in where he came from. Halit asks if he's communicating with his spirit now. The prince insists it's unlikely, as a dead man couldn't possibly look so irritated. Then he asks what he expected, considering he hasn't sent a single message in 2 years. His Majesty says he'll say this only once, and then tells him not to forget whose ship he's on. The man claims that was already rude, and therefore suggests he calm down, calling the little one protector. The caliph looked at the girl and said that now he understands the reason for his long absence, and then asked where this beauty came from. The prince claims he knows where he was. The man turns to the girl and apologizes for being rude, then asks if he can know her name and whether she's really from the other side. The princess says that this is true, and her name is Nalasi, and it is an honor for her to meet the Scarlet Wings immediately upon arrival in Iran. The caliph smiled and said that he was amazed at her knowledge, and that since he allowed her to call him caliph, and as a warrior, he would be happy to serve the sweet girl. Caliph Astas of Kajak, known by the nickname Red Wings, is the portly brother of Khalid. He reports that if he had been told in advance, he would have given them a grand reception. The prince believes that even if he had sent a man, he could. He doesn't think he would have done anything. After all, he's never received a warm welcome in his entire life, and he doesn't understand why he would now. Upon hearing this, the man claims it immediately made him look bad, and that if he'd known he wouldn't be alone, he would have brought Shakira with him. Khalid asks if his wife is okay. He replies that she's perfectly fine, but she prefers to stay home for now, since she gave birth only recently. The prince recalls hearing the same thing before sailing. The caliph claims it was 2 years ago, and his children are all handsome and take after their father. This time he wanted a daughter like Shakira herself, but alas. At this point, the main character thought about how this beautiful couple had 5 children, and now they had 6. She remembered that her assistant had told her that the prince, the caliph, was Khalid's cousin and owned lands east of Iran, including the Khazadeh Gorge. The lady surprised asks why the Kajak warriors obey him and wonders if he too is a prince. Simon explains that in Iran, all descendants of the imperial family are called princes and princesses. Sureb, which is west of Iran, belongs to Prince Halit, and this is the western border of Iran. The eastern border of Iran is the domain of Prince Khalifa, and the entire eastern border of Iran is the responsibility of Prince Khalifa. The southern and northern borders are guarded by the empire's troops. The crown prince is the most powerful warrior in the imperial family, which is why he inherited the most neglected territory. Of Serber, considered the most dangerous territory, began to flourish, thanks to the efforts of His Highness. The man informs her that later he will explain to her why this land is considered dangerous. The caliph asks if it is customary for them to shake hands, and then says that it is a great honor for him to meet her. Lacey understands that the prince caliph is still an important person in the empire and wonders if this is normal, but she thinks that she cannot ignore this gesture and then touches his hand. Suddenly, the girl felt pain, and she did not understand what happened, but at this time, the prince came to her and healed her hand with the help of magic. When Lanahan saw this, he screamed and asked the lady if she was okay, and the prince told Simon to examine her. The assistant takes the lady by the hand and asks for forgiveness, then explains that it will only take a second. The heroine saw that the prince was very angry, and then he approached his cousin, and she called him. The girl thought about how he always responded when she called him. The caliph smiled and said that you wouldn't believe it right away. Simon insisted he'd been warned and couldn't understand why he'd done such a thing. The master apologized for frightening him, but he himself was surprised, and he himself knew that few could resist his magic. Lacey reflects on the fact that her body is on fire because of the very magic that she still cannot feel. Zephyr decided to take revenge on the master and tore his cloak, but he asks for forgiveness and claims that he is guilty and that he simply did it out of curiosity and suggests that he calm down already. The girl understands that she can't let things slide because he's still stubborn and rude, and then she turns to the military leader and asks if he minds if they finish greeting them here and suggests shaking hands anyway. When Simon heard this, he said that Prince Caliph's magic is very strong and aggressive, and of course it's good that he's trying to be polite, but he shouldn't risk himself. The Caliph informs his assistant that he can hear everything, and the prince touches the girl and says there's no need to rush. The young lady insists that everything will be fine, but at that moment, she thinks she's simply curious about him wanting to experience his magic. Lei knows that he greeted them so warmly that it would be awkward to leave everything like this, and then asks the prince if he agrees. Halit wonders if he can refuse her, and the girl offers to shake hands, but suddenly, when he touches his hands, she doesn't understand what it is, and it's as if she's standing in the middle of a fire, but the flames don't burn her. The princess thought that it seemed to her that it should hurt, but there was no pain, and she thought that no matter what she had to endure. Halit suddenly grabbed the lady, and she asked in surprise why he did this, and at that time she saw Terra Khalifa, and because of him, he received the nickname Red Wings. The gentleman smiled, and at that time, Lei thought that he would pull the sword out of its sheath, and he would laugh. Khalid looked at the little girl and said she really was special. The bearded gentleman told his Terra to calm down because everything was fine, then turned to the lady and said he could have bitten hers. The Caliph claims that she is a very brave girl, and then asks if she really came to them from that side, and understands that the world is truly surprised. Simon is surprised to hear that she was able to handle the prince's magic, and he knows that no one has ever managed to do this before. The woman says that she heard that the power of Prince Caliph corresponds to the color purple, and then the servants began to say something among themselves. Lacey doesn't understand what the conversation is about, and thinks that maybe she did something wrong because they are talking. Halit hugs the girl, then kisses her and says, he can't take it anymore. She suggests he answer her first. The girl doesn't understand why she has a feeling down there again, and she doesn't know how to think when this is happening down there. The Caliph is surprised, and says that he hasn't felt anything like this for a long time, and asks what kind of magic she has, since he thinks that the unique color of her eyes and the energy of water were promising, but he didn't think that she was so strong, and wasn't even afraid of his Tarus. The main character says that Halit was nearby, and that's why it happened, but he objects and says that it's not about that, but rather that she just instinctively understands that she is stronger than him. The gentleman says he's interested, and thinks that despite the element, her power is offensive. Halit says his brother was even scared when he heard this, and the man explains that he was just a little nervous. The prince says that Teru wouldn't have appeared because of a nervous breakdown. At this point, the girl wondered what it meant that Teru appeared, because its owner's life was in danger, and she wondered if she had really attacked him. The Caliph says that it is time for him to go, and if he returns late, Shakira will be angry, and then greets his brother, and says that welcome home, and therefore he will have to work immediately upon arrival in Cerebri. The master agrees with him and tells his brother to protect his lands. He says not to worry about it, and to let him know if there are any problems. Finally, they reached land, and the priestess said with delight that they were home, and it turned out that a lot of time had passed. A golden country surrounded by deserts, and when the main character heard about Irina, only gloss and luxury appeared before her eyes. But for some reason, this view suddenly seemed familiar to her. The young lady wondered why he'd suddenly kissed her and embarrassed her, and then she remembered her assistant's words about how a relationship wouldn't be based solely on physical intimacy. Feelings were also important. The girl became curious whether her feelings for him could be called sincere because his bright smile, sudden kisses, honesty, and fleeting touches, and also that look when he calls her, and understands that this is all the reason for his rapid heartbeat. Halit asks if she likes it here, and the assistant turns to the gentleman and offers them to eat in the cabin because he has something to report. The man explains that until today, it was just a proposal, but it seems that Her Highness's magic has already begun to gain strength. Hearing this, Lacey was surprised, and said that first, it was necessary to become stronger, then form the true, and then the abilities could be developed, because that was the order according to him, but she did not feel anything. Simon believes that she is apparently an exception, and His Highness the Caliph deliberately allowed their forces to clash, and in this way, he wanted to show them his superiority. The assistant informs that his friendliness means nothing and suggests remembering that in Iran, one can force a person to kneel without using a single threat. The girl was surprised to hear this, as she had never imagined he would make her kneel. The prince claimed he was rude and she even shook his hand. Simon believes there are two options: surrender or accept the challenge. The lady realized she accepted the challenge, but believes it was unintentional. The man explains that a person in their right mind would have given up and avoided direct contact with Prince Caliph, but in her case, the decision was made by her own power. The princess asks if she has already had a Taru, although she understands that she did not notice the appearance of some animal. Simon says that if we assume that they have an invisible Taru, then it is already coping with its duties with a bang, and then says that his Taru is merciful to those who are kind to its master, and when faced with the master's enemy, the Taru will attack him or try to protect the master. The gentleman explains that Teru's behavior is intuitive and that it's difficult for her now, but soon she too will begin to understand the meaning behind Teru's actions. He then explains that it's not that she didn't understand what she was doing, but rather that her actions were dictated by intuition. Halit believes that since she is already subconsciously mature for this, it will be easier to further develop her strength, and then asks what she felt where he tried to suppress her. The lady replies that she didn't even realize that he was trying to do this because it seemed to her that she was at the position of the mountain where a volcanic eruption was about to occur. The girl reports that at first she was confused, but then she realized that it was just a vision and calmed down. Simon screams and says that his feelings were transmitted to her and believes that this is not just a vision, but that he saw and felt her Terra, and apparently he really has already appeared in her because he shared his feelings with her. The man asks if she felt it all vividly, and therefore believes that the revelation of his abilities is just around the corner, and if so, the entire scientific world will be turned upside down. He then says that as soon as they get home, they will try to test her power again. Lacey keeps telling the gentleman that she's not even surprised by his impulsiveness, and then asks if he thinks so too. The prince says he's surprised that his woman is even more stunning than he thought, and that's why he's even more captivated by her. The little girl says that no one can see them now, and then asks what the compliment is all about. The lady was thinking at this point that if they were in public, his acting would be justified. He asks if it's possible, and then declares that he's enchanted by her and isn't afraid to use the word in love. He then asks if they'll go out as he thinks she'll like Kajak's port. Lay says that she thought that they had already arrived at their destination, and he explains that they have only moored for a while and will soon leave for Inan, and then says that it is beautiful here, but it is a pity that they will not be there for long, and offers to give her something as a souvenir. The prince tells her to choose whatever she wants. The girl, surprised, says that they even sell gold jewelry right on the shelves, and she wonders if gold here is really like any other ordinary commodity. The guy suggests that she speak in a whisper, because he thinks that they shouldn't attract too much attention. Halit says that he is glad that no one has revealed them yet, and therefore suggests enjoying this moment of freedom, and then asks how she likes the decoration, because he thinks that it suits her, although he understands that everything suits her, and therefore suggests choosing it herself. The main character approached the girl and asked if she did it herself. The prince thought that neither the room full of sapphires nor the room full of gold interested her, but the lady said that she chose this hairpin and then put it on her hair and asked if he liked it. His Majesty understands that at the sight of this little hairpin, her eyes lit up, and he has no idea how to behave now, and then asks if she likes it and offers to take the blue one. Halit says that she can take both because she understands that it is difficult to understand what is hidden in the shadow that has enveloped her, but soon she will only glow and nothing will remain from this shadow. The guy says he'll go and look around, but the girl objects, saying she's with him and asking why he's leaving so quickly. She thinks everything was fine, but she doesn't understand why. The prince quietly says they've been discovered and that when he gives the signal, they must flee. He suggests they ignore him and not look back, and if they attract attention, no one will pursue them. If they are discovered, they won't be able to sail away from here today. At this time, Lanohan, crying out, turns to Prince Halit and calls his name, and then asks to be allowed to accompany His Highness. Hearing this, the locals are surprised and say that their heroes, Prince Halit, have returned, and they understand that they should greet him, but they are curious about who is next to him. The prince announces that the time has come, and then grabs the girl by the hand, and they run away, and since they don't need any extra greetings. When Lay returned, she decided to take a bath and Sui asked her if she enjoyed the walk. She replied that the port seemed very lively and even a little magical, but to be honest, it turns out she missed the land. The princess says her mood even improved. After the short walk, Jan asks what color clothes she'd like to wear today and how she should style her hair. The lady says she's entrusting her image to them today. Sui then suggests she choose the jewelry herself. The protagonist looks at the jewelry in surprise and says, "It's very beautiful, but it's a shame they don't have magic." The priestess says that this color suits her and suggests simply engraving the runes on the stones. Runes are magical symbols. Objects with them become magical. They are applied not only to jewelry, clothing, and dishes, but also to ships. Sui is informed that their powers will not be enough to imbue the item with strong magic, and moreover, they can simply ruin the precious amethyst. Lei asks if this means they can also make magical items. Jan replies that priests can engrave runes on jewelry, but their power alone won't be enough. The lady asks why, and she replies that they only recently became full-fledged priestesses. Jan explains that besides, they haven't practiced for a long time, having spent 2 whole years on the other side, and besides, only the prince usually engraves runes on items with precious stones. Sui explains that amethyst is considered a precious stone, so it cannot be damaged, and imbuing the item with weak magic is a dubious undertaking. Hearing this, the main character thought that they were so worried about such trifles, and she was still content to just wear the necklace as it was. The princess asks whose jewels these are. Jan replies that, of course, they're hers. Just like everything else on this ship, the girl asks if that means she can do with them as she pleases. They reply, of course. Lacey says that since that's the case, she suggests that they practice applying runes to them together, since she also wants to try. The young lady realizes that the dress is a little short in the front, and at that moment, the prince enters the room, and she says that she was waiting for him to ask her something. The prince grabs the girl's hand, and at that moment, she hears Lanahan's voice saying, "She's very sorry." The lady asks what's going on, and if that isn't Lanahan's voice. His Highness replies that this is indeed the case, and she begins questioning him about what happened at the port. The girl says she understands, as she's been torturing him, and then asks why he ran away, believing he would have explained himself, and that would have been it. Halit says that it is true, and then says that he just wanted to support her hand again. He hugs her around the waist and tells her not to run away, because she herself said that they no longer need to run away. Lei insists. She's not running away because they're alone here and have no one to hide from. He asks if she might respond to his confession, but she remains silent, and he says he's willing to wait if she needs a little more time. The main character thought about the true feeling of love, which people make up legends about, and the girl doesn't know if it's her, but his self-confidence, thick eyebrows, a look that makes the imagination run wild, those strong shoulders and dark skin, the warmth of his body, and long fingers with protruding veins. Halit says that he doesn't know what's going on in her soul, but he knows one thing for sure, and the little girl says that she likes him too, and she has finally made up her mind. The man asks if this is a forced answer. She explains that lately, various thoughts have been bothering her, and everything in her head is jumbled, but now she is sure of her feelings, and that she likes him. The prince thanks her, and then tells her that's enough, then kisses her. She asks if he'll tell her exactly why she attracted him. He replies that if he starts listing all the reasons, she'll have to do the same, and then asks if she's ready to hear the answer. Lee objects, and asks if he really thinks she'll reveal all her secrets to him, and also asks why he took off his clothes. He replies that her words made him feel hot, and then asks if she wants them to have a drink. At this point, the main character doesn't understand where their relationship will lead. He asks if she likes warm wine, then kisses her on the lips and suggests they begin. The girl asks, surprised what to start with. The prince replies that they'll share secrets and take turns talking about what they like about each other. The lady replies that she likes his voice, and he asks what exactly she likes about it. The little girl replies that it's hard to explain, and he asks her to think about it because he wants to know everything about her feelings. Khalid kisses a girl, and she tells him to stop because it tickles her, and he suggests that he then get down to business and admit, at least to himself, that what is happening between them now is extremely rare, and he feels like he is going crazy from thinking about her, and that is why he wants this, and asks if she understands. At this time, the main character thought that she liked absolutely everything about him, and when he began to caress her, the world faded away. She believed that he was right, because she confessed, and now there was no point in worrying about it. The girl suggests doing it, but not here, and he replies that they can't go to the bedroom, and that no one will disturb them here. The girl says that when he speaks in that voice, it's simply impossible to refuse him, and he asks if he heard right, and if it was consent. Lacey reflects on how the debts she suffered as a child after her mother's departure were a far greater disaster than her mother's departure itself. The girl didn't want much. It would have been enough if someone had helped her pay them off. One day, a woman approached the little girl and asked where she was running from the loan sharks and whether she had decided to follow her mother. The lady asks if she wants to go with her, and the girl, surprised, asks who she is. The woman offers to choose whether she will follow her mother or her. Lay realizes that she had no reason to live, but most of all, she was afraid of dying, and then she gave the woman her hand and agreed to go with her. In the morning, when the girl woke up, she thought that she had another strange dream and did not understand why after a night with him, there followed a memory of the past. Suddenly, the main character remembered that yesterday she was right there on the table with him and couldn't understand how this could have happened. She couldn't see how she could avoid dying of shame. She knew she'd had a great time, but still she was on the table. Zephyr says that this is a good job, because last night she tried very hard hearing this. Lay screams and asks how long he has been here. The priestesses ask Her Highness if she is awake, and then apologize for not wanting to catch her off guard. The princess wonders what's going on, and suggests they tell her Sui apologizes, believing they've ruined everything. They tried to engrave this precious amethyst, and now they're ashamed, and it can't be restored to its original glory. The lady understood what was going on, and then said that he didn't care. Of course, she wouldn't be angry, since she herself had given them permission, and therefore she wasn't sorry at all, since this was the first magical item they had tried to make together, and she would cherish it. The priestesses report that they do not know anyone with such a big heart, and will try even harder in the future. At this time, the main character thought that they might have problems because of her, and she needed to consult with Simon about this, because she didn't want them to get into trouble because of her. The girl is thinking about whether she should ask if there are other stones on which she can practice. The prince insists that it is impossible, and Lay asks why he refused her so abruptly, and at that time, she thought that she had only asked where Simon was. Halit replies that he doesn't know what she's up to, but he won't change their agreement, especially the last point. The little girl says that she would like to add one more point to their conversation, and then says that no sex unless necessary. Lay asks if he is talking about the point about sex, and the man claims that he is talking about that, and at this time, the girl is thinking that he thinks that she will forbid him to touch her. The girl asks what he is so worried about, and the prince, crying out, reminds him that, by the way, yesterday, everything was consensual, which means they both felt the need for it. The main character asks what if they remove it. The guy is surprised to hear this, and she suggests removing the clause altogether, as she feels it was rather selfish of her to do so. Lacey says that she decided to add him at the last minute, and didn't even take his opinion into account, and therefore suggests simply removing him, since she didn't like him anyway. The princess is wondering if this can be done, because she thinks that they cannot change the contract after signing it, but she assumes that maybe this is allowed there. The caliph turns to Nell and informs her that he's warning her immediately, and if she changes her mind later and wants to return to the way things were, it will be too late. She asks if he should bring her their agreement yet. The prince suggests they do it later, and stand like this for a while longer. 25 days have passed since the ship sailed, and albeit little by little, their relationship has begun to change. The gentleman says that as soon as they arrive in Enon, he will need to take care of a small matter. Simon asks who he is talking about, and whether it has anything to do with Her Highness's abilities. Halit says he needs to find out where Nell lived, before he asks if the gentleman wants to know about that lady. The prince understands that she has certainly matured a lot, but the fact that she does not remember him at all confused him, and therefore does not think that she simply forgot about him over time, and assumes that she has lost her memory. Halit says that since they are getting rid of the useless clauses of the contract, he would like to ask her a few useless questions, and then asks if she really doesn't remember the day of their first meeting, or if she is pretending not to remember. The girl claims she remembers their quarrel at the ball perfectly well if he mentions it. The gentleman asks her to forgive him for that time, as he had been searching for her for so long that their meeting seemed a miracle to him. The prince thought that seeing her smile at that guy, he couldn't think of anything better, and had only insulted her. The little girl explains that she didn't know back then that things would turn out this way, and therefore doesn't need to apologize. She simply accepted it as part of her job. Lee asks why he was looking for her specifically, and if he'd actually discovered she was a good actress. Hearing this, the guy is surprised, and she explains that although Veronica would have become the villain according to the plan, no one knew that back then. The main character says that all his sudden aggression was something new for her, and she means that she usually finds an approach to people right away, but she immediately quarreled with him, and it's funny. The gentleman asks if that's true, and she insists that of course she was very proud of herself because he was hurt. Halit says that long before all this, when she wasn't yet Veronica, it was raining heavily on the bridge, and that's when they first met. The girl was surprised to hear this. Simon asks in surprise if she shouldn't have remembered everything after the magical restrictions were lifted. The master says she should have, but she didn't. The assistant says that this is why everything needs to be thoroughly investigated, because if Her Highness's memory does not return, then he becomes curious about what will happen to their relationship in 2 years. Suddenly, the prince warns Simon about the danger, because a guest has come to them. The woman asks if he greets all his guests half naked, and he tells her to move away. The woman offers to explain herself first. The main character reports that she heard a rumble on the deck and went out, and at that time she saw a strange scene. The prince was lying on the floor, and the woman was on top of him. The girl asks what they are doing here and then asks who can explain to her what is going on here. Nefer looked at the lady and asked who she was. The prince explained that she was his princess consort and then asked if she would get off him. Hearing this, the woman was surprised and asked whose wife she was, and the gentleman replied that it was obviously his. The lady wondered when he managed to get married. Halit says that he will soon get married, and therefore suggests getting off him. Nefer screams and says that now he understands why they haven't heard anything about him for a long time, and she can't believe it, and then reminds him that he said it was for a maximum of 3 months. The woman claims that this is how it happened. He left and hasn't been heard from for 2 years. He tells her to calm down, but she screams and asks if he's asking her to calm down, believing he has no conscience at all. Nefer asks if he has ever thought about her brother, who is stuck in remote areas because of him, and then angrily suggests saying at least something, at which time she pulls out a knife. When the main character saw this, she decided to stop her, and then grabbed her hand, but suddenly the girl wounded her. Lacey says it's a shame their first meeting is going like this, and then asks if it's possible to resolve the matter peacefully. Simon asks Her Highness if she is okay, and she explains that it is just a small scratch. The prince asks if she is sure, and also if there are any more wounds, and at that time, he thinks that if he had known that this would happen, he certainly would not have allowed it. Sway says that if she had a little more experience, she could have healed her wounds. The little girl insists that everything is fine, and she's fine, but then she thinks that she's sure she managed to dodge her attack because she understands that she wields some kind of magical object. Sway suggests the mistress soak her feet, as it will calm her nerves, and of course the tea she's prepared will help her relax. At this point, the girl thought that, in her opinion, they all needed to relax. Simon comes into the room and says that it looks like she wants to apologize for what happened. Nefer turns to Her Majesty and asks her to forgive her recklessness, which has caused her trouble because she dared to wound the one who will one day become empress and must be punished. The girl kneels and says she's very sorry, and if her mistress takes pity on her, she can take her lands. Lei cries out in unison that this is unnecessary and believes that she is also to blame for what happened, then asks the prince if he can leave them for a minute. The main character realizes she has to apologize in front of everyone, and she's sure it's humiliating. Halit asks, what if she does something again? And the little girl replies that she's unsure and suggests leaving them. The princess turns to the woman and asks her to stand up, then asks if she thinks this is too much, and then explains that everything happened because she did not immediately realize how strong she is, and asks for forgiveness for attacking Princess Nefer like that. Hearing this, the woman, surprised, asks how she knows her name. The young lady thought about how vast the imperial family tree was, and she had difficulty remembering her name. The girl remembers that Simon said that Princess Nefer is an important member of the imperial family because she is Prince Khalid's cousin on his mother's side and a dark warrior who protects Sennar, which is the borderlands in the southern part of Arena. Lei says that of course she knows the man entrusted with guarding the southern part of the empire. The woman insists she has nothing special and still has much to learn. The princess apologizes once again for leaving such a terrible first impression. Then she asks if she thinks she can keep this a secret from the rest of the imperial family. Nefer asks if she wants to say she doesn't intend to make a scene about it. The lady replies that she would prefer it to be kept a secret too, as she considers it improper. The guest reflects on the fact that she thought that since she was the wife of her selfish cousin, she was no different from him, but she believes that she is completely different because she has a mysterious and bewitching charm, and her outfit matches the color of her violet eyes so perfectly. Nefer believes that what is important is that she radiates an aura of goodwill, and the closer one is to her, the stronger it is felt. The prince asks what's taking them so long, and the blonde asks why she agreed to marry him and whether she's being held against her will. She thinks they're blackmailing her, but she also suspects they might have kidnapped her. The woman asks her to blink slowly twice if she is here against her will, and then says that she will not argue because she knows that her cousin has his shortcomings, but the fact that he is a good leader does not mean that he will be a good husband. Halit screams and orders her to get off his ship immediately. The lady asks if she heard, and then insists that he's heartless. The prince believes she broke into someone else's ship and caused chaos. Lei tells him she's right, as it's impossible to predict how their marriage will turn out, but she's certain of one thing. The prince will do everything to ensure she doesn't regret her choice. After all, she loves him. The main character wonders if she's overdone it, or if she's spoken convincingly enough. The gentleman tells her he loves her too. The girl thought that although she was afraid that her true feelings would come out, and that one day Khalid would understand everything, some part of her wanted this to happen, and if only she could secretly convey her feelings to him. Nefer doesn't understand what he did to deserve her, and believes he may have saved the world in a past life. The assistant turns to Her Highness and says, "It seems they need to leave," and so suggests they leave. The woman turns to the man and says that she understands that he brought her into this room because he wants to say something and asks if this is true. Simon says he thought he should assign her a priestess, but not until they reach Inan. The princess asks what nonsense this is and wonders why a powerful priestess would accompany a weak warrior, since even she understands that it's not necessary. Nefer says she wouldn't mind if Simon were with the priest. The master thinks a woman would be more suitable for her, and she's no weakling. She says it was a joke and suggests telling the twins to come see her later, as she's missed them. Simon says he's sure Sena and Lana will be happy to hear this. The woman says she missed him most of all, and is glad to be here seeing him after so many years. The assistant turns to Her Highness and informs her that he too is glad to see her in full health. Hearing this, the lady doesn't understand what a fool he is, pretending not to notice her hints. The man asks what's wrong, and Nefer replies that everything is fine, and she's just glad he's here, and then says that about 3 weeks ago she received news from her brother in Sarajevo, and thinks that something strange has been going on at the border lately. Simon asks what exactly, and she replies that the mutants have started to attack less often, and he says that it's like the calm before the storm. Nefer says that people who don't understand the situation claim that this is a sign that the curse is weakening, since exactly 3 weeks have passed since the news was received. The assistant realized they had crossed the border around that time, and wondered if their numbers had dwindled after the dragon's appearance, hoping it was just a coincidence. The woman wondered why it took them so long to return. The prince says that he sees one thing, and then another, and this is what happened, but besides, he is not obliged to explain anything to the Nefer. The little girl thinks that he could have embellished the truth a little, as they told their story back then, and for example, he could have told her that they fell in love with each other, but their love was not destined to happen, but they still fought for their relationship, and somehow, miraculously, everything worked out for them. Halit says that he doesn't think she would believe him, and if he told her that he had been looking for her for the last 2 years, she definitely wouldn't believe him, or would have understood everything incorrectly. The girl asks what difference it makes, what she thinks of her there, and then insists that it was exactly as he said. He says he knows, but still prefers to remain silent, and believes his words could somehow limit her, since she so loves freedom. The prince realizes that it is difficult for him to be honest with her, because he is afraid of her running away as soon as she finds out that of the two of them, only he is keeping the promise they made 10 years ago, a promise that she does not even remember. The gentleman thinks waiting is easy, and he'll wait until the end of his days, until all her memories return, just as he waited for the 2 years he spent in Weldon. After all, waiting is nothing compared to the joy her existence brings him. Halit simply wants her to be by his side, and that's all he asks for. Then he turns to the girl and tells her not to worry about Nefer, because Simon will take care of everything, and besides, they have things to do. The prince agrees, and then declares that her word is law on this ship and takes her in his arms. He says she is allowed to do anything except abandon him. The lady wondered why she should leave him and thought that they understood what her reasons might be for this if she was in love with him. Halit suggests not to talk about his love in front of other people and then kisses her passionately. The next morning, the main character thought that this could not be a coincidence because she had strange dreams every time she spent the night with Halit. The girl thinks that this is all because of the coincidence of their horoscopes, but neither Simon nor Nefer ever talked about anything like that, and she thinks that maybe she should discuss this with Halit. The main character muses that maybe everyone knows something she doesn't. The blonde asks the lady what she's thinking about, and then says she's been transported here and hopes she doesn't mind. Nefer turns to Her Highness and asks her to hide her because they do not leave her alone, because they offered to comb her hair and then let her hair down. Lee thought she really was a free spirit, and the woman asked what was bothering her. The lady wondered if she looked like she was worried. Nefer finally asks if she regrets her decision to marry Halit, and then says that if she wants, she will help break off the engagement. The main character asks Princess Nefer if she's happy about their marriage. She replies that she can't say she doesn't like the idea of seeing her cousin smiling and flying in the clouds, then says it's so disgusting and asks who would want to witness such a sight. The blonde asks if she knows that Iron is cursed, because some time ago, mutants began to appear here out of nowhere, as if a curse from heaven had fallen on their land, and the lands of Khalit Cerebra turned out to be closest to the source of the curse. 10 years ago, when the entire empire was in danger, it was the Khalit who saved them all. The girl reports that Simon told her about this, and thanks to his actions, he became crown prince. Nefer says that thanks to Khalit's victory, their empire was able to resume relations with the neighboring empire, while before that, Iran was completely isolated. Lei wonders if she's talking about the Grendon Empire, since it's ruled by a powerful emperor, and their army is merciless. The blonde says that since then, they've been searching together for a way to lift the curse, and believes they'll succeed sooner or later. Halit is their hero, and he was only 17 when he saved them, and he's their son, so he believes the lady has nothing to worry about, as their marriage will be easy and happy. Nefer reports that in the end, their son chose her, and no one will dare to dispute his choice. The priestesses tell the princess that they have prepared everything necessary for engraving the runes. The lady apologizes and then asks if they came for her because she was late. The lady explains that she and the princess had such an interesting conversation that she completely forgot about the time, and then tells the Nefer that she needs to go and asks that, when she has a free minute, let him come to her. Nefer asks where Halit found this beauty, because he believes that this girl is a pure diamond that radiates only rainbow color. Simon says that it's nice to finally relax, because he even managed to soak in the bath, and when he saw the prince, he asks in surprise what happened, because he scared him. The gentleman explains he urgently needs to discuss something with him. The assistant, surprised, asks what he means by resting. He suggests continuing with his work, but the main thing is to listen to him. The prince says that a water priestess paid him a visit, and I showed him a chest that he should see. The gentleman asks in surprise if this isn't a necklace for his future wife, since all three had runes engraved on them, and as he was told, they would become magical attributes. Sui says that she applied the rune to the necklace in the middle, and the runes are so small that she couldn't even see them, and considering that she is a water priestess, she understands that these are healing runes. The priestess says that this was her intention, and if he looks closely at them, then asks if this rune reminds him of what he engraved in the sanctuary. Hearing this, the prince was surprised, and asked if she wanted to say that she had engraved a rune that even the high priestess had difficulty with. Sui says that she understands that her words seem ridiculous, but this is the only rune that Her Highness touched, and perhaps that is why she was able to engrave something that she could never do before, because she understands that it is very difficult for priests and priestesses to find a patron, and asks if this is true. The gentleman says that from this day on, he will always support the three of them, and in return, they will serve faithfully and truly, but not to him, but to Nalasi. The prince says that they will not tell anyone about this, and does not allow the true meaning of this rune, to be revealed to Her Highness, and hopes that they will explain the current situation to the other priestesses. Simon asks His Highness in surprise why he decided to tell him about these important events in the bathroom. And he also wonders why he decided to keep this a secret from Her Highness, because just think she is able to influence the engraving of runes, and he has never heard of such a thing, and moreover, isn't the purification rune engraved on the staff in the sanctuary. Simon believes that she has the power to change Irina's fate, and says that she will immediately inform Her Highness about this. The prince turns to his assistant and states that he does not need to think about it, then asks him not to say anything to His Highness, and asks if he should remind him of the fate of the previous bearer of such power and how her last days went. Unlike healing magic, which heals wounds and restores energy, purifying magic has the ability to reverse destruction and impurity. This power affects the balance of power throughout the world. When Irin was on the verge of extinction, due to a dark curse that no one could lift, a heroine appeared who managed to save the empire. Without a moment's hesitation, she sacrificed herself to awaken the power of purifying magic. Ultimately, her actions cost her dearly. Simon turns to His Highness and claims that the situation is different now, and the Empress Aeromatus had to bear the burden of the entire empire on her shoulders alone. The man believes that if at least her husband could create magical objects, it would be much easier for her, and she would not have to use so much magic. And then he looked at the prince in surprise and asked if he knew all this time that Her Highness had the power of purification. Khalid reminds that he already told him that it would be better if he directed his actions in a different direction, and, for example, towards a woman whom he seems to really like. The gentleman says it's just advice, and in general, he won't change his mind. Simon, surprised, asks what she did, that he knew the truth, and then asks how he could have hidden it until today. His Highness asks the assistant whether he serves Her Majesty or the imperial family. Simon says that if he had at least told her when she first began to show her abilities, the prince thinks that there is no point in these questions because she does not remember. Khalid asks if she really doesn't remember him, or if she's pretending, and she asks if he wants to say he was there. He replies that he was. Lacey asks in surprise how he recognized her, and the guy asks how he could not recognize her because the sound of the rain, the noise of the river, her voice, and he has not forgotten anything from that day. The girl thinks it's amazing, but she's embarrassed that he remembers everything from that day, and she was dressed so terribly then. The next day, everyone was talking about nothing else but that the mistress of the Duke of Luxel's future son-in-law had committed suicide, and that she then called herself Brianna. The prince explains that he wasn't talking about that, but about events long before. The lady asks if he's talking about the day she had to jump off the bridge to escape the noble brute, and then explains that it was 7 years ago. The gentleman asks how many times she's jumped off the bridge. The main character wonders how she can believe him if he refuses to tell the details, and judging by the fact that he has been waiting all these years to get the actress, she can only imagine what his plan is. The little girl thinks that there is no need for him now, and asks if this is true since they get along so well, but not trusting someone requires much more effort than he thinks. Simon says he understands why he asked him to find out about Fiora. The gentleman says she's not trying to deceive them, but he honestly doesn't remember, and thinks he must have gotten out of bed on the wrong side of the bed. Halit reflects on how it took him so long to get closer to her, but he doesn't want anything to threaten their relationship. The assistant turns to His Highness and says that he understands everything, and if she still doesn't remember anything, then their relationship will go to hell in 2 years, and this whole operation is a huge disaster, but not for him, since he came up with a brilliant idea. Simon, the son of an elder and a brilliant scholar, always sees things through to completion. He's even written hundreds of works, but he often finds himself in awkward situations. The assistant informs him that he must witness Her Highness's abilities with his own eyes. After all, he is currently putting all his efforts into ensuring that the couple lives happily ever after. Simon understands that when it comes to the princess, Prince Halit becomes more stubborn than a donkey, and therefore believes that he simply has to help Her Highness regain her memories so that everything can finally work out for them. The assistant asks, what if they try to restore her memories using earth magic? Halit explains that too many people are watching her, and if she ends up in an awkward situation, rumors will spread. The man says that he hasn't heard his brilliant idea yet, and then asks if the wedding ceremony is approaching. Sui says that it is a special day, so it is better to wear new things, but the main character objects and says that these earrings are very beautiful and let them stay, since she thinks that they are very comfortable and look good, and then suggests that it would be better to choose a bracelet and necklace for her. The girl remembered the men who told her to always follow their orders, trust no one, and always be on guard. She understands that once she disembarks, she will become a foreigner, and the only person she can trust in this country is herself. Sui tells her friend that she was wearing these earrings when they first met, and thinks that they are very dear to her, and it is good that she still has something native. The main character thought that she was worried, and the prince turned to her and said that he wanted to see her and wanted to touch her, but she objected and said that it was not necessary because the makeup would ruin it. The gentleman asks who made her so beautiful, and the lady explains that she will be appearing in this city for the first time, so she wants to look perfect. Halit says that he is not okay because she has become even more beautiful, and he cannot really see her face and kiss her. Lacey saw the river and asked if they were heading to Ainan, but she really liked the scenery, and she knows that this river sings with its water to the whole city. The girl saw a lot of people and asked why there were so many of them, and the man explained that they had been waiting for her for a very long time. The princess turns to the gentleman and asserts that she will not let him down, and then asks how far they are from the city since she does not see the pier. Halit explains that they won't be stopping at the pier, then screaming orders them to furl the sails. Hearing this, the main character asks how he can do that since they're in the middle of the river. I understand how they'll sail if they furl the sails, she says. He tells her not to worry because everything will be fine. The priestesses began to sing a song about how the golden raft that created the world descended from the sky and opened the world, the water flowing from side to side. Hearing this, the main character thought that this song was like the wind and waves leading a ship with lowered sails. Halit received the blessing of magic, born in the magical void, and the mysterious woman who attracted the dragon's attention with happy amethyst-colored eyes. They came in a golden raft, came from the edge of the horizon. Fate decreed it, as if it was waiting for a prince whom it did not allow to return home for a very long time. And the girl became interested in whether such beautiful stories exist and believed that everything would work out for her. Halit offers to go with her, but she must close her eyes and count to 7. The main character realizes that this man is her betrothed and the future emperor. She is his fiancé and truly loves him, so that's why she's here. And when Nalasi opened her eyes, she heard that the Khalit crown prince Irina, in the imperial city of the Holy Empire, solemnly announced that he had returned with the most amazing bride with whom he would spend his entire life. Lei wondered if this was the imperial palace of Irene, and the man sitting there was Emperor Sirim, his wife, Empress Kalka, and Prince Surid, and this was the Halit family. The girl found all this confusing. Halit says that he returned after fulfilling the order of His Majesty because he delivered half of the precious stones mined in another country to the port of Kajak. The emperor says that he knows that he has completed the task and then asks his son if he doesn't think he should tell him something else first. The young gentleman looked at the young lady and then hugged her and asked to let him introduce Nelisi, the woman who would become his wife, and then he kissed her. Hearing this, the father turns to Her Highness and says that they must make an announcement and organize the wedding of the crown prince, and then says that returning with the bride and not saying a word is sad. High Priest Cyrus claims that in light of recent events, they must hold the wedding as soon as possible, perhaps even tomorrow, but the emperor says there is no need for such haste since the priests must first choose a suitable date. The man says that they will choose a date and make an official announcement, and then asks where the High Priest of Water is. At this time, the prince does not understand why there is such a rush, because they just returned, and the man suggests immediately informing the High Priest of Water and hurrying, because it is about the wedding of the crown prince. The main character watches all this in amazement and asks why everyone is so excited. The prince explains that it's because he's usually conservative and asks if she wants to confirm this. When Simon saw how the prince looked at this girl, he screamed and said that they should urgently call a council. The young gentleman tells the lady that there is one thing she should not doubt, and that is his modesty. Meanwhile, she thinks that these people don't seem to know a true Khalit. The empress asks the girl if she was named after the sea goddess Nilais. Meanwhile, Lei wonders if she's imagining things or if they're at odds with each other. The woman reveals that she was named after a goddess and hopes for a similar end. Upon hearing this, the protagonist doesn't understand what it means. Nilasi is the name of the legendary goddess of the seas, and Irene was originally a federation created by one of the 4 royal families. Different regions tell different legends about the goddess. Legends of the South and North tell of foolish or unhappy love stories, but the legend of the sea goddess Nalace is more cheerful. It's somewhat reminiscent of a fairy tale about how the sea goddess fell in love with a human and managed to overcome the rejection of the other gods, and they lived happily ever after. Lay believes that something is bothering this lady because she looks sad and therefore decides not to aggravate the situation, and then turns to Her Majesty and says that he doubts that her words will calm her down. The princess says that if she gives them her blessing, she is sure that it will be a great start to their marriage. The empress claims that of course she will give them her blessing, because after all, she was waiting for this marriage, and then she welcomes Nalasi. The owner says he's sorry she had to go through this, as it wasn't long ago she gave birth. The woman says it's not worth it, as serving him brings her and her child great joy. The owner offers to tell her everything she saw today, and the woman reports that the crown prince and his bride have arrived at the imperial castle. He asks if her powers have awakened. The sorceress replies that together with the priestesses, she tried to engrave the rune on precious stones, and she managed to engrave the rune of the ship, but she was still unable to do anything divine, and it seems she will need time before she can cast complex spells. The gentleman realizes that this is all taking longer than he expected, and this is complicating everything, and the lady wonders if they should attack during the wedding ceremony, as she thinks this is an excellent opportunity since they will let their guard down during the festive festival. The sorceress says that since Lana will soon be leaving to guard the border, they will have one less experienced warrior. The mage believes this will definitely be an excellent gift for Khalit. The knight turns to Her Highness and says that she is amazing because she settled everything with Lana so easily. Lanahan turns to the lady and says that she swore to be her knight, and now she needs to leave before their wedding ceremony, and she is very ashamed of this, and therefore asks to forgive her. Lacey claims that she has nothing to apologize for, because she is the head of the Sherber Guard, and it is her duty, and then asks her to get up from her knees, because instead of an apology, she wants her as her knight to promise her something. The lady asks her to promise to take care of herself and not get hurt before she returns, and then asks if she can promise her this. Lanahan promises that he will return without a scratch, and the lady says that she believes her. Nefer reports that now that Lana has gone to defend the border, Khalit will also leave the imperial palace immediately after the wedding. She understands that it all happened so quickly, but she became curious about how it was possible to hold a wedding celebration in just 3 days. At this time, the main character thought that there were too many eyes watching her here, and it would be much easier for her when they left for Cerebra, because there were so many people there. Lay says that she is sorry that she will not be able to find out much more about this place before their departure, because she wanted to know more about the place where the Halit grew up. The blonde says she hopes it will be a consolation to her that he didn't spend much time here as a child, since it's true that he was born here. Nefer reports that because his powers were too unstable in his youth, he spent most of his time isolated in a water sanctuary. The girl, surprised, asks what unstable means, and the woman explains that he was born with very powerful magic, so powerful that this force caused him harm, and as she heard, the late empress greatly helped Halit. The blonde reports that, as a result, he learned to control the enormous flow of magic flowing in his body, and although he wears many different magic-suppressing items as a precaution, she is sure that the lady herself saw that he is overflowing with mana. Nefer says that, frankly, she's infuriated by how amazing he is. The princess says she's glad he's okay now, and then thinks to herself that she wonders if their horoscope compatibility helped him in any way. The woman says that they are here, and that a Halit has grown here, and that their wedding ceremony will take place here, and this place is called a water sanctuary, and then asks if it is beautiful. The girl saw that the fresco depicted the story of Irina's origins and the creation of the introductory sanctuary. Nefer reported that this relic could only be seen here. Lee says Simon described her to her once, but seeing her in person was a bit of a surprise. She looked closely and thought it seemed familiar, and remembered the guy telling her she should wait for him. The knight asks the lady if everything is okay with her, and at this time, the main character does not understand whether it was an illusion or a dream, because she became curious about what he was doing there. The girl remembered the prince's question. Did she really not remember who he was? Or was she just pretending? She knew he'd asked her this question again and again, and each time she'd been confident in her answer. However, she realized she was now forced to doubt everything, even her memories, which she'd always been certain of. Nelisi asks why, and also wonders if he was there, and at this time she loses consciousness. After her mother's death, the main character did nothing but wait for her mother's return or for her death to free her from the debts her mother left behind. The girl understands that this is not what she expected. She fulfilled the prince's words that he promised to return to her, and she had to wait for him. Lacey believes that the boy who once appeared in front of her and then disappeared was a miracle, and she had to survive if she wanted to see him again. And even if for this, she had to wander the dirty streets and beg for money, she had to do everything to survive. The little girl knew that the day would come when they would be united with him again, and told herself that she would do anything to wait for that day. The girl asks if Her Highness is awake, and then says that it is an honor to finally meet her, and says that her name is Shakira, and she is the high priestess of the earth. The woman looked at the young lady and smiled, and then said that she understood correctly, because she was the wife of the man with the loud voice. Shakira says that the crown prince wanted to stay with her until she woke up, but he had no choice, and the emperor called him and he had to leave, but he will return soon. Lei explains that she didn't mean that she missed him or anything like that, and then says that she just dreamed about him, and it was such a strange dream. The high priestess informs Her Highness that it was not a dream, but a fragment of her forgotten memories. The young lady, surprised, asks what forgotten memories she's talking about and what she knows. The lady replies that, frankly, the crown prince does, and she was only planning to help her regain her memories on their wedding day. Shakira believes it's likely her strong will that has already begun to push her to remember, but she says she's still not sure exactly what she saw. The priestess explains that this is because whoever was responsible for the loss of her memories did everything possible to ensure that she would never be able to collect all the fragments. The girl became curious about who did this to her, and the woman said that in order to wake her up, she had to look into her memories, and they were more detailed than she expected because she was not exactly sure what they did to her, but one thing was clear. This had been going on for a long time. Hearing this, the main character remembered the man who told her that she should remember to always take away what is someone else's, but at the same time, not let anyone take away something of hers. The young lady believes this man is behind all of this, and she doesn't understand how he could do this. She always thought these people were her only family. Shakira suggests considering it an illness, because she has been ill for so long that she will now need time to recover, but this does not mean that it cannot be cured. Nalasi screams, asking what she can do to fix it. At that moment, the gentleman enters the room and asks if she's awake. The priestess tells the prince that when he finishes, she needs to talk to him because she has something to tell him, and then leaves them alone. The girl turns to the guy and doesn't understand what to do because she can't look him in the eyes. Halit touches the lady's face and asks if she slept well, but at this time she doesn't even know what to answer because she wants to ask him so many questions. Lee wondered what he was doing that day and why he looked so desperate. She wondered why he suddenly disappeared and how he managed to find her and what it was like for him during her unconsciousness. The main character understands that she shouldn't become emotional just because memories started to return to her and thinks that she must look so stupid now. Meanwhile, the prince hugs the girl and asks her to listen to him, knowing that everything seems confusing to her right now. He suggests they rest a bit and think things over, and after that, she can ask him anything she wants, since no one is rushing her, and they still have plenty of time. Shakira tells the gentleman that it is not only that she has forgotten the past, and then says that some memories have been changed, and she does not know how this can be done without using magic. The priestess says that if it weren't for his horoscope compatibility and the signals sent by her inner strength, it would be very difficult to get to her memories. The woman reports that she heard the voice of the mistress when she was in her head, and if everything goes well and she manages to awaken her magic, the restoration of memories and powers will be only a matter of time. At this time, the main character thinks that this must be her inner strength, and she wonders what Fiora and that man did to her. The prince asks Nalasi if she is feeling better, and then apologizes for not telling her the whole truth right away, because he did not intend to keep it a secret forever. The lady believes that while they were in another country, he could not tell her anything because of the ban, and when they arrived here, he understood that she would not believe him, and therefore believes that he has nothing to apologize for because he did nothing wrong. Halit smiled and said that everything she said was true, but the only reason he didn't tell her anything was that he was afraid she would run away from him. The girl asks in surprise what he is talking about, and the guy asks her to think about it because she was his main target from the very beginning. Lee wondered if he had come to Weldon to find her, and at that moment, she realized that he had been thinking about her for the past 10 years. The man asks if she regrets boarding his ship that day. The young woman reflects that she doesn't really believe in fate, but she knows that life is full of surprises. Lei believes that the fateful encounters in her life were not always pleasant and happy, for example, her relationship with Madame Fiora, or the ship on which she secretly snuck, and with whose owner she unexpectedly entered into an agreement. The girl wondered if she hated being on the ship as much as she hated being with Fiora. She couldn't understand why she'd spent most of her life playing different roles, since she couldn't bring herself to stay in this man's warm embrace. The young lady apologizes and then explains that she needs time, and the prince, surprised, asks what's wrong. She wonders if it's okay for her to just stay with him like that. Halit asks to tell him why this worries her so much, because if her feelings are so strong that they make her worry, then he wonders why she hesitates. Lee explains that she spent almost her entire life pretending to be someone else, and that she was a servant who betrayed her master, a count's mistress, a homeless woman who deliberately forced others to mock her, and Veronica, a cheater who tried to commit suicide. Lacey says that she played these roles well, because it was the only way she could survive, and she doesn't know what it's like to be herself when he's around, and then says that she will most likely continue to deceive him and everyone else, and in the end, he will regret his decision. The Khalit would regret it. The man says that he doesn't care, even if she deceives him, because he believes that she can play any role next to him, because those years that he spent looking for her, so that they could finally be together, were not as terrible as all those years during which he did not know her. Halit tells the girl that he doesn't care if she ends up regretting her decision, and then he hugs and kisses her. So the main character realized that the Khalit had given her power over himself, and then came the selfish thought that now she had every right to hurt him and make him regret his decisions. Zephyr says the gentleman that as a person not particularly experienced in such matters, he did an excellent job and managed to console her. His Highness explains that this is because he understands that she is in great pain, because he wished that at least someone was next to him when he was alone trying to control his magic. Tiger believes that this is the first time he has spoken about that time, and in any case, he was very upset by his lack of any progress, but is glad to know that everything worked out for him. Zephyr says he understands that the gentleman is in excellent physical shape, and that's thanks to their compatibility. Halit agrees, claiming he feels better than ever, and then recalls the girl's words about how he would ultimately be the one to regret his decision. The prince looked at the sleeping Nalasi and thought that she should hold on to this thought as long as possible, because he hoped that she would always think that one day he would regret his decisions, and then she herself would not have time to regret them, just so that she would stay with him longer. The man says that there is no need to be afraid of him, since he has no intention of harming his mistress, and in any case, being her Teru, he himself knows what is best for her. Zephyr reports that he noticed something hovering over Nalasi while she was sleeping, but today was the first time that something had taken shape, and he believes it won't last long. A few days later, the lady says that time flies so quickly and asks if she is right, since their wedding day has already arrived, and as expected, this day has arrived so hastily. Nefer addresses Her Highness and says she looks tired, then asks what's keeping her awake at night. The lady informs him that she knows Halit is forbidden to see her while she's undergoing her purification. Nalisi explains that she is simply very nervous, that's all, and asks if they should not allow the lovers to see each other before the wedding. Doesn't it seem a bit old-fashioned? The blonde says that she actually heard that he almost cried on the first day of the cleansing, and she is sorry that this period lasted only a week because she would have liked him to suffer much longer. Hearing this, the main character realized that he did not cry because he came to her, but she could not say this. The girl asks, "What if someone finds out?" And the prince suggests that she relax since no one will find out. Lei asks if he thinks it's complete nonsense to force them to undergo purification, and that doesn't mean he can secretly sneak into her room. Halit says that she is heartless and asks to at least allow him to stay here, and then says that he knows that it will be difficult but offers to try to cope with it. The young gentleman says that in return, he promises that on their wedding night, he will pay her for all the nights she spent alone, and then hugs the girl. Lee offers to let her go because it's very hot here. The girl understands that he must have been waiting for this all week, but doesn't know what to do. Simon turns to His Highness and says he looks pleased. The master asks why he shouldn't be pleased. The assistant explains that just a week ago, he acted as if the world had collapsed and thought that something was wrong here. The gentleman says he heard that envoys from the north have arrived. Simon reports that they represent Princess Ignar and believes it seems they are willing to do anything to attend his wedding. The assistant says that after all, it is a great honor to be invited to the wedding of a member of the royal family, Irene. Usually, such an honor is given to close relatives, but since the parents of the bride will not be able to come to the wedding, their places were given to the Eastern Prince Khalif and Princess Nefer from the south, but only representatives of the north did not receive an invitation. Simon turns to His Highness and says that they already have strained relations with the kingdom of Ingarte, and if he ignores them, their relations will become even worse. The prince asks if they were ever good. The man replies that Princess Ignar is engaged to Prince Suhrid, and in addition, the kingdom of Ignarte guards their northern border with their water sanctuary. Simon believes that if the High Priestess of Water promises Princess Ignar a place, and at that time he fell silent because he saw the High Priestess of Water Métis. The prince turns to the woman and says that his aunt is not always eager to fulfill the requests of her relatives. The Water Priestess tells the prince to never forget those who sacrifice themselves for him. He tells her he hopes she won't forget either. The woman believes they cannot allow her death to be in vain. Halit says he is certain his aunt remembers perfectly well why his grandmother sacrificed herself. The Métis thought about how he dared to speak to her like that and considered him an unbearable monster. The woman turns to Her Eminence and says she's so glad to see them again. Princess Ignar thanks her for meeting her so quickly. Matis reminds her that she said she wanted to talk to her about something. The princess explains that her father is actually very concerned about the gravity of the current situation. The lady says that the arena border is guarded to the west by the warriors of Cereber, to the east by Hazek, to the south by Senner, and to the north by the kingdom of Ingarte. The lady says that the contribution to defending their borders was completely ignored when guests were invited to the royal wedding. Ignar reports that she came to find out that it is possible that the High Priestess of Water will be so kind and condescend to Ingarte. The priestess says that when she says descend, she wonders if she means that she wants to receive an invitation to the wedding of the crown prince, and then says that she is afraid that this is impossible. The half-breed claims that it is impossible to change the decision made by the imperial family, the council, and the four saints right on the day of the wedding ceremony. The woman says that she cannot help her with this, but everything could change if a vacancy suddenly appears. Hearing this, the princess was delighted, and then thanked him for the good advice. When she left, the lady thought she was a foolish girl. The assistant asks the priestess if she wasn't glad to see the princess after so long, and thinks she looks very much like him. Matis says he's right, because she really does look like his mother, Remedis, who died because of that bloodthirsty monster. At this time, the main character became interested in how many rituals they would have to go through during the ceremony, and thinks that it is so tiring, but she is interested in how the prince is, and thinks that he probably exploded with anger more than once. Karim, goddess of the seas, and progenitor of the kingdom of Irene. She fell in love with Sirim, the sun god, and their children founded the empire, now known as Irene. Sirim and Karim were inseparable and truly loved each other. The girl believes that if she remembers everything correctly, only the heirs to the throne could be named Sirim and Karim. Nelisi realized that this was not the first time she had seen this, and believed that it was no longer possible to write it off as a simple coincidence. The prince, lying in bed, asks the girl if she remembers the first time she summoned her Teru, and also asks if she remembers when she said her first word or took her first steps. Halit reports that at some point she gets used to the presence of Teru, because it's like an instinct. At this time, the main character thought about what was also happening to her, but she doesn't know whether it was instinctive or not, but she always tried to ignore it. The girl remembered that when she was a little girl, someone called her master, and said that she would not find her mother here, and asked her to listen to him because the dead do not return to life. The young lady realizes that in the end, it didn't help her at all because the voice was telling her things she didn't want to hear. The man turns to the little girl and claims that she shouldn't believe her words. Lei reflects on how, when her teacher erased her memories, the voice in her head became just a strange noise. Now, however, she's trying to regain her memories. The girl asks if he hates her, and the voice replies that, of course not, and calls the girl master, and asks how he can hate her, and then says that he is very happy that she can finally see her. Teru claims there's no one for whom the name Karim suits her, the master, The same name is shared by the goddess of the seas and the bride who crossed the ocean for her beloved, and then asks if that isn't wonderful. Zephyr tells the master he's right, as it's been a long time since he smelled something like that. The prince says he thinks Nalas is truly not wasting her time. Teru turns to the main character and says that it would be nice, even if it took a little longer. The young gentleman tells Ignar that she is a good girl because his gift was there too, which he wanted to give himself, and that is why he is so glad that she went with him. The princess asks if this is the first time they've seen each other since their engagement, then says she's sorry she can't visit her more often. Then she thanks him for helping her get inside the palace today. Ignar understands that it is impossible to get in here without an invitation to the wedding, but she thinks that she must somehow get this invitation, and then she took the box and thought that she must do it herself. Nefer saw the princess. She was surprised and asked what she was doing there. Ignar didn't understand why she had met her specifically, and the mistress said she could safely call her big sister. The blonde says she sees that the sweet little brother of the terrible Khalit is here with her, and the guy insists that she shouldn't call him that. Nefer asks if this is a gift for Her Highness Nelisi, and then says that it is a beauty, and asks if he can find out what is in it. The princess replies that it's a simple amethyst ring. The woman surprised asks if it's the same one she received from the high priestess of water as a child. Ignar was informed that after the wedding, Her Highness would be going to the mutant-infested Cerebra, so she wanted to give her an item with a purification rune engraved on it. The princess remembered the woman's words about how everything could change if a free seat suddenly appeared, and she wondered if she could convince the princess to give up her seat at the wedding to her. At this time, Nefer thought that everything was now clear to her because she was going to give her a gift and beg her to give her place at the wedding, and considered this girl to be still naive. The blonde wondered if she should tell her that the princess didn't need such things. A few days ago, a woman asked Simon what it was, since she'd picked it up on the deck. He replied that he thought it was a necklace the princess used to practice rune engraving with the priestesses. Nefer asks in surprise if he knows that the rune of purification is engraved here. He answers that yes. At this time, the lady says that she is interested in whether Nalesi will like this ring, and thought about the fact that Sweet Simon asked her to keep it a secret. Ignar suggests that the lady not to worry about it, because after all it is her gift, and at this time the lady thought that this princess is not as sweet as Simon's. The priestess reports that Her Highness has completed the prayer ceremony, and Nefer offers to present a gift to Her Highness. Suddenly, the blonde felt a strange power, and realized that this person was Her Highness Nalasi, and believed that this was the reincarnation of the legendary goddess. Simon informs His Highness that Princess Nalas has arrived. The main character asks if they've been waiting for her for a while. At this point, the princess looked at the surprised gentleman and decided that she thought this was too much. He wondered if this was a dream. Lei thinks that it seems he has not yet fully realized the prince thought that although he was aware that his princess was perfect, he then said that today he promised himself to satisfy all her requests, and now she appeared before him in this form. Halit says that tonight he will have to put in more effort than he expected, hearing this girl say that he is truly very cunning. Teru asks the lady if they are destined to become enemies, and she thinks that it would be better if it weren't so. The prince invites the girl to go with him, and then offers her his hand, and informs her that a wedding ceremony awaits them. At that moment, the princess thought she'd acted like a fool and ruined everything, and then she remembered her father's words. She was the treasure and pride of the kingdom of Ingarta, and must live up to her high status. The girl understands that without a doubt, her father will be disappointed in her, not to mention her presence. Ingar turns to Her Majesty and asks if she could accept a gift from her, because he believes that nothing could please her more than this. The princess thought about the fact that she had given her a precious ring with an amethyst, but she could not even imagine that Her Majesty had such power, and therefore was surprised, because she herself did not know about it. Suddenly, the servant saw the princess and was surprised. He then asked what she was doing there. He said the wedding ceremony for the heir to the throne had already taken place. Halit tells them to praise her. Hearing this, the protagonist reflects on how she didn't think this would affect her wife, the heir to the throne, since so many people are celebrating their wedding, and she wonders if she can handle such a responsibility. The prince suggests that Nelisi try not to think about anything, at least today, and then reminds her that he said that he would become the whole world for her, and then kisses her hand. Zephyr says that he can't watch this, and then turns to the mistress's Teru and offers to talk about her. Tiger reports that every time he feels Nalasi's full strength, it is impossible not to bow before her, and he perfectly understands this desire inside when she wants to boast of the strength and power of her mistress. Zephyr says that until this force becomes one with her, they all need to be careful, and then asserts that when adults talk to her, they need to respond. At this time, the main character thought that now her heart was fluttering and beating hard in her chest because she knew that this had never happened to her before. The magician asks the servant if he acted as ordered. He replies that he is sure everything has already been delivered to the bride. The sorcerer says that in this case everything should go well, since now is a good time. The man says that probably after the ritual in the water sanctuary takes place, he will finally get everything he has desired for so long, and he will be next to his master in the name of the future kingdom of irony. The final ritual of the wedding ceremony is the Na vow. It unites the couple's spirituality into one through a combination of magic and ink diluted in water. A priest blesses the couple and applies a corresponding design to the bodies of the bride and groom to create an unbreakable bond. Since the patterns are applied to the bodies simultaneously, they can only be removed simultaneously, and if someone decides to remove them, and at that time the prince thought that he definitely has no intention of removing them. Shakira announces that the canal has been inflicted and asks to accept her heartfelt congratulations as she welcomes the new union, and then reminds that there is still one last step left, and this wine is made from grapes growing in sanctum. The priestess says that she blesses the fruit grown from generation to generation and prays that this blessing extends to their children and grandchildren. The prince quietly asks the girl if she can pretend to drink and also touches his lips to the glass of wine. The water priestess announces that from now on, their souls are immortal, just as their bodies were given life on earth, so their souls will receive immortality and they will become gods. The Métis says they will become the heart of Anu, and their children will be the descendants of the gods. The woman names the descendants of Sirim and Karim, those who will in the future bear the title of Heartman. The aunt says that in the name of the Rametis' daughter, the ceremony is over, and wedding rooms have been prepared for them, where they can be alone, and they should know that the doors will close behind them as soon as they enter the rooms. The half-breed announces that no one will disturb them for 3 days. Suddenly, the main character faints, and the prince takes her in his arms and screaming orders the doors to be opened quickly. The princess asks in surprise what is happening and where he is in such a hurry, but she thinks that this is not the issue and that something is wrong with her. Zephyr says that something happened to her magic because it is extremely unstable, and it seemed strange to him that her teru suddenly disappeared. The prince asks when this happened, and he replies that it was immediately after they entered the altar room. The gentleman reflects on the fact that her peaceful appearance was just a pretense, and he does not understand how he did not notice it. Nalasi tells Halit she feels strange and then asks how the ceremony went. He screams, insisting it's somehow significant, while the girl faints. The main character doesn't understand how it all came to this, because at first she just had a slight fever and didn't pay attention to it because she thought she was just nervous before the wedding ceremony. Lei remembered that it was only when she stopped hearing Tara that she realized that something was wrong, but she didn't fully understand what was happening. The young lady knew that if she lost consciousness, she would ruin the wedding ceremony, and she also knew that whoever planned it all was counting on exactly this. The girl understands that Halit had been waiting for this day for so long, but she didn't want to ruin his holiday, and believed that she should just endure the pain and pretend for his sake because he told her to do what she does best. The prince asks the girl if she is awake, and at this time, the lady thinks that it is hard for her to breathe. Khalid insists everything is fine because all the poison has left her system. He hugs her, but she says she's too hot and has trouble breathing. The young gentleman says that everything is fine now, and he is nearby, and therefore believes that nothing will happen to her, and then kisses hers. At this time, the main character thought that his breath was similar to the life that he instilled in her. Halit thinks that she ate something she shouldn't have, but she understands that the food was prepared for her with special care, and then asks if she remembers what exactly she ate before the wedding ceremony. The prince thinks that judging by how quickly the poison left her system, it was not fatal, but he knows that she still has difficulty breathing, and the fever has not gone away. The gentleman understands that this happens if you overdo it with magic stimulants, because the stimulant helps those who have depleted their magic reserves. But if consumed by someone whose magical powers have only recently begun to awaken, they can cause dangerous side effects, and even lead to death. Halit suggests trying to remember what she ate. The main character recalls that for breakfast, she had soup with pastries and a glass of water, then she drank a glass of juice to quench her thirst and calm her nerves. The girl remembered the guy said that he picked this pomegranate from his favorite tree and hoped that she would accept this modest wedding gift from him. Nelisi reports that his younger brother brought her a pomegranate, and the gentleman asks who else was with her, and also wonders if anyone thought to check it before giving it to her. The little girl says that she is hot, and he explains that he knows that it is difficult for her, but asks her to try to remember. The main character hugged the man and said that his body was very cold, but he said that hers was hot, and that this was not how he wanted to spend their first wedding night. The prince claims that whoever did this to her will not escape retribution, and then says that she must cope and hugs her tightly. The half-breed asks the lady if she came to check on her. The lady replies that she knows perfectly well that's not why she came. Shakira says that they, as high priestesses, must discuss what happened to the prince's wife during the ceremony. The métis says he thinks she came to confirm his suspicions, not to express concern. The lady reports that she did indeed have vague suspicions, but not directed at her. The priestess says that to be more precise, she thinks what happened to the princess wasn't entirely her doing. Auntie insists that this only means she too hasn't determined who's behind it. Canal was applied to her body, but she attributed this to the fact that her power had only just awakened. The lady believes that this is a completely normal phenomenon in such a situation when magic and Teru are still unstable, and it would be rash on her part to claim that the wine she drank was the cause of the instability of her magic. The priestess informs that it is also necessary to acknowledge that for her interference with her magic does not bring any benefit. The métis agrees with the lady and says that she is right, because she does not need this, and then says that the most interesting thing in this whole story is that they did not take a sip from the cups of wine. Auntie says that knowing that they only got a blessing from her, for some reason she still came to her wife. Shakira reports that the cups were not just a blessing for them, but that the wine she prepared contained a fertility potion. Matis says that she is not the only one in this kingdom who wants an heir to be conceived as soon as possible, especially considering that the child of these yours will have enormous powers. The priestess, surprise, says they just got married and thinks there's no need to rush. The woman, however, insists there's nothing wrong with building the future by anticipating it. Auntie says you never know when this monster will lose control of himself again. Hearing this, the lady asserts that Halit no longer poses a danger. The woman asks if she can guarantee that what happened in the past will not happen again. Matis remembered that she had to check something, and then said that she needed to check, because suddenly the same thing that killed one of the previous contenders for the role of Khalit's wife would happen to Her Highness. Lei saw the prince. She screamed and asked why he was walking around completely naked. He asked what the problem was, since he would have taken off his clothes anyway, and besides, he took them off because of her. The gentleman reminds her that last night she begged him to hug her, and asks when she got better, and whether he was no longer needed. Then he says he must say that it breaks his heart. The girl says that she didn't say that, and then screams and orders her to get dressed immediately. Nalasi looked at the table with food and said that it looked delicious, and she was just getting hungry. The lady asks if this means they're supposed to spend the next 3 days here together. The man says yes, and she's thinking about how he's finally dressed. The prince explains that this is the final stage of their wedding ceremony, and they say that long ago, to avoid the prying eyes of the other gods, Karim and Sarim made love in a cave. Halit says she can consider it a tribute to the past. The little girl thinks it's a kind of honeymoon since she's married to him now. The gentleman says that it is time to talk about what happened, and the lady asks if he really believes that this is the work of Prince Surid. The prince says whether he wanted to harm her or not, but now he is a potential suspect. The girl realizes she wasn't the only one who ate the pomegranate. Princess Nefer and Prince Caliph ate it with her. She wonders what he was trying to achieve with this stimulant. Then she reminds him that he said it wasn't even a lethal dose. Lee believes that if he tried to interfere with the ceremony, then there are other ways to ruin it, and at that time, she looked at the guy and became interested in what he was thinking about. The princess asks what he is hiding from her. The caliph, surprised, asks what he could be hiding from her. The little girl thought it was strange because usually he immediately tries to convince her otherwise, but she thinks that he is definitely hiding something. The main character reflects on the fact that even though he behaves secretively, she should not be offended by him for this, since they are not here to destroy the boundaries they have established. The girl thinks that even though she doesn't know what he's hiding, she also has secrets from him, so these boundaries between them calm her down. But still, if these walls they've erected suddenly fell, who would be better off? Nilasi touches the man and says that she will not ask about anything, but she will not pretend that she does not notice anything either, especially if what happened concerns her. The prince kissed the girl and asked if he was really that predictable. She said she'd prefer it if he told her everything, rather than tried to hide it. The caliph says that he only did this because he wants her to focus on them, and if in the future he hides something from her again, it will be only for this reason, because everything he does is for her. The gentleman thought that he doesn't know who exactly is behind this, but he knows why they did it, because by threatening Nilasi's life, they were trying to intimidate him. The prince wondered if they were still trying to take away everything that belonged to him. At this time, Ignar does not know what to do, because it is unlikely that she can return it to him personally. The man says that he thinks he heard the princess's voice somewhere here, and at that time, the girl hid, and thought that she didn't want anyone to see her like this, because she considered it a shame. The gentleman took off his cloak and then covered the girl with it, and said that it seemed that Her Highness was in a difficult situation, and if he allowed it, he would help sort it out, and asked her to wait a little. The princess thought about how he walked around the imperial palace with his nose in the air, and yet he was a commoner, but they understood that it was all her fault. A servant approaches a commoner and asks if he's seen Princess Ignar, and the guard suggests not wasting words, as he doesn't understand why anyone would ask someone like him, and then they leave. The lady thought that if this was a warrior from a lower class, then it must be Sienna, the servant of the crown prince, and she became interested in how she could apologize to him. Nefer asks the princess in surprise what she is doing here, and Ignar is interested in what she is doing here. The lady explains that she asked first, and the princess says that she was just going for a walk. The blonde asks if she wants to say that she came all this way to walk in the palace of the crown prince, and not in the beautiful garden of her fiancé. Nefer looked at the cloak that the princess was holding in her hands and asked if it didn't belong to the rank. Hearing this, Ignar doesn't know what to say, and asks screaming if she can give it to him for her. The lady realized the cloak belonged to him, and wondered if he really gave it to her. Then she asked if she meant to say that the all-powerful Ignar had wandered the palace to return the soldier's cloak, not to mention that she was asking for her help in this matter. The princess says that she understands that this is unnecessary trouble, but she does not know how to return his cloak to him without violating the rules of decency.